So 115 people already. Wow, that's going to be quite a workshop. And we are going to start in 2 minutes from now. I'm going to just quickly remind you, everyone, here is a Google Doc that we are going to use. We'll find all the slides and all the recordings later. If you need to leave early, maybe I could actually stop music as well at this point. If you need to leave early or you are going to watch this later, you will find everything in there. So everything, including all the dark secrets and the bright ones, I guess, because there are some solutions to those problems as well. Let me make sure that I have a proper microphone here in place, just in case. The microphone is okay. The video is, for now, okay. Jan is still floating in space. Everything is in order here so far. Jan, what is it like over there? Is it cold? Oh, you're muted, Jan.
Yep, slightly cold, but it's fine. I come here for the lights, not the heat.
Sure, that doesn't surprise me. Hello from hello to Seattle, Anna, as well. All right. Well, thank you all of you, first of all, for joining. I'm very, very excited for this. Oh, I think that you started a trend, Jan. It seems like some people have now moved to Northern Lights, including Clau. Clau, you are making me scared at this point. But that's great. Hello, Maria. Greetings, warm greetings to Ukraine. Portugal. All right, let's have it. Who is coming from where? Where are you connecting from? Could you write quickly in the chat, just so we get a couple of cities? I'm sure. Oh, Estonia. I'm coming to Estonia later this weekend, Rosa. What
I know.
You'll be there.
Super excited to meet you next week. I couldn't make it to the workshop because of work, but I'll be on the conference. Yes.
Oh, that's great. That's excellent. I'm so excited to see you as well. Oh, Artur from Estonia. Well, Artur, I think I know you. I think we had a communication already at this point. Vilnius. Wow, I'm going to Vilnius as well this weekend. Wow, what a miracle that is. Wonderful to see you all coming in. So thank you so much for joining. We probably should be starting because we have a lot in front of us. Now, you decided to spend 1 hour, at least 1 hour, who knows how long it's going to long, at least 1 hour looking at this screen right here. Why would you do it to yourself? There are so many wonderful things you could be doing today. You could be reading incredible articles, you could be going ahead and, I don't know, walking outside, maybe spend time with loved ones, and you decided to be in front of a camera on screen. Why? Why would you do that to yourself? Oh, that's a great start for a workshop, right? Could you maybe just give me a good reason? Can you write in the chat? Why? Or maybe not in the chat. Let's do it differently. Maybe not in the chat. We actually set up something that could be actually more helpful. So if you look at this Google Doc, please don't write it right here yet. You will find a lot of stuff in here now that more people are joining. You'll find slides that you can go ahead and download ahead of time. I'm so excited, by the way. It's like unbelievable. It's like 220 people that came already. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for coming. You also find a link to the Slack channel where you can actually mingle and talk later. If you have any question that you would like to ask me later, you can do that there as well. Stephanie's in the house. Great. Hello to Stephanie. And we also have a music playlist. Some people like music, some that we're playing, some people do not, but you can find it over here. And also a link to the video course that we have released with a little friendly coupon code of 20% off if you use the code Dark Secrets. It's a nice thing. I'll talk about it later. But more importantly, you also have this collaborative notes doc right here. And this is basically, I'm going to share a link to it as well. This is what we do for all our workshops, collaborative docs, which is basically just a
shortcut combo is, maybe it's even a piano chord. And we're going to go ahead and save that for you.
We need to unmute somebody, I think. Yeah, friendly and respectfully, of course. And this is a place for everybody to take notes together. This is also a place to take, to write down takeaways and questions and screenshots and links and everything like that. Even if it's just 5% of everyone is doing that, this is going to be an incredible resource by the end of the day. So we'll learn hopefully a lot. So if you are kind of in it, you'll be actually generating a really nice report for the end of the day. All right, so maybe in here you could say, why are you here today? Could you write just a couple of keywords? Like what brought you to this place in the first place? Right, off we go. There is something happening. A product designer that wants to, all right, let's not break it. Well, oh, maybe let's break it. Why not? It's a good day to break a Google Doc. Like, why not? right? So maybe curious about the topic, inspiration, right? Oh, somebody saw me doing a word. That makes me happy as well. A product manager that wants to help guide the team more. So staying up on the latest ideas is important. Curious to see how the smashing workshop goes. Curious to break the Google Doc, maybe. Let's see. Tired of designing in a vacuum. Need a dose of inspiration. Right. That makes me happy. I'm going to look back into it, so please complete it as you go. That makes me very, 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 very happy. And had nightmares, says Tia. Well, I'll do my best to avoid them from happening. All right, well, I better get started because we have a lot of stuff to cover. Oh, hold on, I have to change this over here. Always mixing this up. And let's go ahead and just dive in. Dive into all these nightmares, into all those frustrations, into all this horror that's happening around us, and see how we can actually make it better, right? But for that, we need to kind of set the settings of the context a little bit. And I have to tell you a little bit about myself. And I think at this point, one critical part would be that my start, the start of my journey was here. Anybody remembers this or knows what this is? Please write a plus in the chat if you do. Yes, this is the time when everything started for me, not on the web, right? I think I cannot hear me anymore. This is when I actually got into computers, and I was so excited I would play day and night Prince of Persia. Oops, hold on. Prince of Persia, trying to get to the point where I actually hit the goal within 60 minutes. I never made it. I never made it. I just couldn't make it. So I had to watch a walkthrough later. But that was so exciting for me. It was incredibly exciting for me. It's not that many that will be having audio here, videos. So in here, this was the site that changed everything for me. Does anybody remember this site anyway? Oh, Claire remembers. That's great. That's an old one. Do you know that this website today is 27 years old? I believe that some of you sitting here are younger than this website. And sorry about all the flashing animations and all of that. That's incredible. This is when I encountered this beauty and fascination. I wanted to create something like this, like all the time, like every single day. I wanted to do something like this every single day. This was the time before Flash actually existed. This was Shockwave. And that was incredible. I spent days and nights trying to figure out how to do those things. It was so exciting. And then, of course, over time, we learned a lot of things on the web, right? We got to pages that look like this, right? Which was incredible. It was also flashy, but it's different. This is kind of video text meeting web design, I guess, in the time when web designer was a thing. Now everybody's a UI engineer or UI designer or UX designer, right? But this was web design. And of course, we moved so fast to incredible places. Like one of my favorite websites today is this one. This is a puppet theater website from Poland. And just look at this beauty. Everything is absolutely incredible. From cookie pop-up to all those little animations and carousels, everything is just in place. Everything is just how it's supposed to be. It's fantastic. And even the menus in the top, it's just great. It's lovely, right? But then how come that we ended up most of the time not having this as the user experience, right? But this. This is not exciting at all. This doesn't make me happy, like at all. Every time you need to change a password, well, off you go. Let's explore that journey. Let's take a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and sit down and discuss and explore how to change password, because there are so many rules that you have to accomplish or you have to actually respect. And it's all over the place, right? This is another one I'm wondering sometimes, oh, you have so many different rules and I have to match all of them. It's an incredible, difficult game that I have to play every day. Not to mention these beauties, right? Oh, anybody misses those? Probably don't see them that much anymore, right? But oh my, they were all over the place. And I'm wondering that sometimes I feel like in this movie, like when somebody's playing a game with me, I'm just supposed to solve all these puzzles and go into this maze from one place to another to be able to get something done, right? That's incredible. Now, we don't have that anymore, right? Luckily, this is gone. This is gone hopefully for good. But we have those things now, which is even fancier, because now I feel like not only do I have to solve a maze, I also have to figure out, and this is maybe just me speaking, but tell me if you are in the same boat or not. Sometimes I spend literally minutes trying to figure out this particular pixel over here, that one pixel, is it still a crossroad or not? And I would zoom in and magnify and try to just to get it right, because it's really hard. It really is. So why? So it feels like somebody's pulling something with me, trying to make me, do those things. Just unbelievable. And sometimes, of course, things are not as bad. Sometimes it's just really just badly designed in many ways. This is one of them, when you're actually supposed to choose a flight to board a plane, to check-in, right? And you're supposed to also type in the date of birth, right? So what is the problem here? Just the regular interface, isn't it? Can you tell me what is an issue here? Maybe could you write in the chat? Right, so Lisan is saying that there is no free, no kind of free text input, right? We need to use that widget in order to navigate. And it took me 53 seconds to fill in my date of birth. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have a strong feeling that many people are very much familiar with the date of birth. So it shouldn't be required for somebody to go and explore and kind of move between decades just to find their date of birth, right? That just doesn't feel right. And then, of course, we also get those kind of things. Well, why not? European Union Digital Passenger Locator Form. Now, is this a good way of designing a calendar or time date input? Well, maybe it is, right? It is being used in Android. It indeed is in Android's, oops, it just disappeared. It's an Android's native, hold on, let me put it this way again, right? It's a native solution that is actually being used on Android. But the question is it a good idea to do it on web? And I think no, definitely not, right? Because again, we need to be very, very careful about how we speak about those things. So when I speak about all those things which we might like or we might not like, that really doesn't matter most of the time, because we need to explore them in the context of what is the purpose that they're driving, right? So if I ask you now, can you tell me why you think that this is a good design or why you think that this is a bad design, right? It should not be a matter of taste. You might like one thing, you might not like the other. That doesn't matter. I might have a particular preference as well, right? But we need to have this language that's very, very important when we're talking about all the design patterns that we'll be covering today, right? What does it mean that we're speaking about design, that it's being good? Like, for example, this particular pattern here, like having a date picker like this, is the good design or not? Again, if I ask you, no, doesn't really answer a question. We need to be really we need to be very careful about how we argue about it. Because my job most of the time is convince people who don't trust me that my design works better. Now, hello, by the way, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Vitaly, and I spend approximately 40% of my time in Smashing. The other 40% is working with projects and big projects. One of them being the biggest one right now is the European Parliament's website. So that's a really big website with 138 different sites, and they all have to be merged into one beautiful thing, right? And there, when I come in, and I start arguing about, oh, let's make it this way. Let's add a bit of white space over here. Let's change the flow over there. Nobody trusts me. And I mean it. Not a single person trusts me, right? And so I have to prove that, we have the design X, and now I'm coming with design Y, and that it performs better. I have to kind of really prove it, right? And yes, Gerald, European Parliament's website, right? And that's really, really hard. So we need to be very, very careful about how we speak about design. Because if you like it or don't like it, doesn't matter. We need to think about some objective ways of saying this is good or this is bad. So if you believe that this is a great design, can you give me an objective reason in the text why you think it's a great design? And if you think that this is a bad design, how would we be objectively speaking about it being bad? What makes it bad? So Jen is saying hard to see the date's position relative to the week month. Yes, but then some people could say, well, it's actually easier to find one if you want to be a devil's advocate. You can say, well, you can actually just find Sunday by looking into Sunday instead of actually going to the dates, right? If it helps the majority of users to get their ticket, then sure. Oh, I just clicked out accidentally, right? Yeah, so here we go. Chivali says, well, if it works, then it works, right? And then we have Annie saying they want to do too many things at once, but this is not something that's quantifiable. I can't say that that is good or that is bad. In the same way, I can't say, we have to have 5 menu items because 6 is too many. Too many for whom? Too many why? We can't argue like that. We need to have something much more quantifiable. Too much scrolling. Maybe that's just enough scrolling. What is too much scrolling, right? It's good because I can see onto one screen the day of the week and also calendar date, so it requires less clicks. For example, that could be one way, but then do you need to see it on the one screen? Does it drive any particular key kind of performance indicator in here? Finn is saying bad design because hard to scan and move between dates. Measure usability. Depending on your familiarity with date formats, this is tough to read. Too much reading. But again, we have to be very, very careful here, because there are typically 2 ways of how you can measure usability, right? Or the quality of a design, I would say. One, we give people tasks. We identify what are the most important things that people do on the site, right? And then we try to track, first of all, whether people are successful in completing the tasks with the previous design and with the new design. And second, how much time they spend on that. So how much time they need on average with design A and with design B, but then also how often errors occur in both designs and how quickly people recover from those errors, right? These 4 things are actually usually very, very important. We track how much time people need to solve a task, how successful they are at that, how many errors appear, and how often people can recover from those errors. And based on that, we are usually creating this. This is my dashboard that I always keep in front of me. Depending on the project I'm going to be involved, I'm going to be in one or the other, and I'm kind of cherry picking almost the right aspects for the KPIs. And this goes for many different things. For example, when I was working on a web forms design system, the idea was, well, we need to make sure that the forms we're designing are as accurate as possible, not in terms of design, but in terms of the data submitted to the system, right? That would be the ultimate KPI for the design. On the other hand, you also have, of course, accessibility and performance as a part of it, but you also need to tap into the other things, like, for example, service desk inquiries, right? Just, does our design help somebody reduce the number of service desk inquiries? If your search is better and your navigation gets better, then you can actually help people do that. Let me just jump out very quickly, right? I spent a little bit too much time on that, but please bear with me for just a moment. This is what it usually would look like. This is the deliverable that I prepared for the European Parliament, right? And I want to stress that we decided to track certain things before a single pixel was designed on the screen, right? So what we ended up is creating those kind of design KPIs targets, where we go very deep into accessibility, very deep into web performance, and many, many, many other things, and text and fonts and images. Because as a designer, it's very important for me to know how many fonts I can afford on the site, how many images I can afford on the site. Why? Because I don't know about you, but I've been giving recently, over the last couple of years, I was working on 2 projects which had a tremendous impact on environmental impact. So, the big companies, the IBMs, the Toshibas, and all of them, they all claim to be trying as hard as possible to be sustainable, right? They're trying very, very hard to push for the idea of reducing environmental impact. So my design for the European Parliament now has to kind of match those requirements. I have to perform well in terms of environmental impact, which means, have a very low carbon footprint. And we can have a separate conversation about that. I'm not going to go into the detail, but that goal was defined way before we started designing a single pixel on the screen. And many things that you're going to see today, right, are very much influenced by the KPIs that we defined early on before we even start working on pretty much anything. Does it make sense for you so far? Right, if you could write in the plus in the chat if you can. And that's usually, Leonard, not about just less, colors or less images or less fonts, right? It also has to deal with JavaScript that's being used, how it's being cached, the performance overhead, and all of the things. So we can talk about this in the Q&A after the session for sure, right? But for now, this is just to set the settings, right? Let's dive deeper. And let's start with something that I think in many ways is very often ignored, and that's designing for touch. Now, we've learned over the years that this is an incredible device that we have. We can tap on things, we can click on things, we can scroll things, we can zoom, we can swipe. It's fantastic. And most of the time when we think about this, we often think about those kind of patterns. where some areas are more accessible, right? Some are less accessible, and others are just really, really difficult to access, right? This has changed actually. So according to new research, when we look into how people use the mobile phone and when people tap and click, right, we will find that, you know, these areas are really not like that at all, because you have some areas which are more common because most people, or many people, are using one hand and thumb. But depending on the posture that you have and how you hold your phone, you'll be getting slightly different experiences, slightly different blobs, if you like, right? And you always have, in all of them, you have this primary tap zone, which is the most comfortable area. And this is a central area of the screen. Now, whenever we put our hamburger menu in the right upper corner, right, this is not going to be a great experience, but it's not a great experience at the bottom either, right? So we can't say, let's put it in the middle, because this is where content should live, right? So it should be somewhere on the edges, right? But then we need to talk about just how big those buttons need to be. So when we track, and let me show you a short video here, left we track where people, how people navigate a mobile phone, when they read, when they check, when they click, when they, and so on and so forth. I'm going to show you a video. You watch please carefully and let me know what you find in it in this video. What is this person doing? What is this person doing? Let's play it again. Right. Now, indeed, this is reading, but it's a different kind of reading. It's more like skimming or scanning. So it's really rare that people read from left to right and, you know, going to the next line and so on and so forth. In here, it's indeed skimming, looking for keywords, right? So, you know, having things like bolded words and things like that is very, very important. But we are used to the F pattern, and F pattern doesn't necessarily apply to mobile at all. There's a lot of scanning happening. In fact, if you actually look at the F-shaped pattern article by Norman Nielsen Group, originally published in 2006, right? This pattern still exists on the web, right? But if you actually start looking, there are many different patterns that emerged as well. So F pattern is just one of them. F pattern basically meaning whatever happens on the top, the first line, the first few lines get the most attention. And then as you keep going down, people kind of get stuck to the left side, scanning and skimming, right? And they read less. That's still true, but there are also other things, and especially when it comes to feature comparison tables and things like that, it is going to be different. So there are many different ways, but especially on mobile, there's a lot of skimming happening. What is important for us as designers, though, is that nobody hits the center of an icon. It just seems to be impossible, right? If there is a person who you know who hits the very center of the icon, that's a very special person. You have to treasure them, you have to take good care of them, you have to put them in a museum somewhere. Those people usually do not exist. And if you look in here, I mean, I don't know about this guy over here, of course, but if you look in this on the tracking here, not a single person hit the center of that screen, right? Now that's actually quite significant. Somebody I think is clicking, so maybe you can mute as well, Jan, if you could. Right, so that's it just starts doing weird things whenever I click on Zoom. All right, so what else do we need to know? Now we know that people are never precise in the input. We also know that people spend a lot of time in the center of the screen. This is the most important area. This is the area where people tap, where people scroll, where people, you know, try to read and all of that. So if you're reading an article, chances are high that you're not reading at the very top and not reading at the very bottom of the phone, but rather somewhere in the middle of that phone. This is also where you typically scroll, right? But, you know, things like that. And of course, we usually will be scrolling either with an index finger or the thumb finger, but usually it happens in the middle of the screen. However, when it comes to the sizes, this would be my Bible almost. Whenever I think about the sizes that I need to keep on, on mobile, on the top and at the bottom, we have these guidelines that are coming from Stephen Hoover's research on designing for touch. And basically what he's saying is whenever we're looking on the top and at the bottom, right, and we have, let's say, our icon menu icons or our add to cart icons, things like that, we need to look into at least 44 or 45 pixels at the bottom, but only 42 pixels on the top. Why is that? Isn't this area at the bottom closer to the thumb? That's weird, right? But why is this area? Why does this area need to be bigger? Oh, here we go. Sabine is right, because thumb is flat at the bottom. It's very difficult to be very precise whenever we have to twist your thumb, right? At the same time, it's a bit more easier, especially with the index finger, when you're on the top. But in the middle, whenever you have some buttons or so in the content area, then it could be just 26 pixels or so. It doesn't have to be like 30 or 35, right? So bear this in mind. It's very interesting to explore how we can actually apply it. Now, to frustrations, right? We are used to interfaces like this, right? The cards everywhere, and you start scrolling down and you keep kind of scrolling. Now, here's a question from me to you. If you, let's say, look at this particular screen here in the middle, if you wanted to scroll down right here, right, where would you scroll? Would you scroll on the left side? Would you scroll in the center? Or would you scroll on the right side? It, of course, depends if you're left-handed or right-handed, but in your particular case, where would you actually scroll down? Center, a lot of rights, center, right? A few lefts, not many, middle, right? Exactly. So what happens most of the time in testing, people almost consciously choose an empty area to be able to scroll. So they would be scrolling not necessarily on the right and not necessarily in the center, but just where the empty space begins. So somewhere around here. Why is that? Didn't we teach them that they can actually swipe and scroll everywhere? Why do people actually actively choose the empty area to scroll there? Oops, sorry about this again. Right, to avoid accidental clicks, says Marx. Indeed, we do want to avoid accidental clicks, so people are actually very, very careful in those things. So they will be swiping or scrolling down in the area which is empty. Now, what happens though if we don't leave that space to them? So what happens here? So imagine the entire row being filled with text, right? What would people do then? Well, they would usually fall back to the center. They would still scroll, of course, but they would be doing it a little bit more careful just to avoid getting into that section, right? This is actually what typically happens. Now, what's really interesting, though, about all of this is that when we speak about interface design, in general, it is a good idea to leave at least some space open, right, for people to be able to comfortably scroll. This is going to be a little bit more difficult here because, again, every single card here is a link, right, driving somewhere. But the interesting part is here. This is a map. Now, when you navigate a map, where would you think you would scroll or swipe, right? Imagine you want to look into one direction or the other. You want to kind of move, not necessarily zoom in, zoom out, but kind of move around that map. Where would you do that? On the left, in the center, or on the right? Center. All over, says Timothy. That's about right. That makes sense. And dear friends, this is the most boring part of it all, right? The interesting things are coming in a moment, but we need to get that context right. Somewhere where there is no text or marker. In fact, we'll be kind of scrolling somewhere which is not necessarily related to what we're exploring, because our hands most of the time are not transparent, right? We need to see what we're operating. We need to see, kind of make space for the content. If you look at the study, this is what the head tracking looks like. This is what people tend to scroll, right-handed people, I have to say. Right? So kind of they're looking, what does it mean? They're looking here somewhere, right? And then going up and down and right and left in order to be able to explore, to have at least one area left to explore the content, right? That's quite significant in here. So what does it mean for us? Well, it means for us a couple of things. For example, if we look into design patterns to avoid some of the really painful, frustrating things, one of the common issues that people really, really dislike is the fact that whenever you go to an e-commerce site, you have these color pickers, for example. And with these color pickers, you can choose and change the color. Not surprising. So unfortunately, as you can probably tell, this is now at the bottom of the screen. This is, I don't know, maybe 25, maybe 26 pixels, right? At most. That's small. I mean, surely we can make it bigger, but we don't need it to be big if it's in the center of the screen. But we know that most people, when they actually want to change something, they want to be able to see the image as well. So it will be at the bottom. So how to make it work? Well, we can make it better by making it larger, sure. But what if we have 15 different colors? That wouldn't fit, right? So there is one pattern that I highly encourage you to test And in my experience, it works much better than anything else. I mean, drop down would also work, Leonard. But what you can always do is to give people the comfort of a second click or tap. So that means they tap on the color area and you have this selection showing up where they can actually more comfortably select what is it the color that they want. Yes, it's a secondary tap or secondary click, but it might be worth it because you're going to end up kind of avoiding rage taps altogether. This is why I would always say, maybe it's not necessarily a bad idea to just replace those hover action items on the right with just a bigger button saying actions and then show them on tap, on click, right? And at least you can test it and see if it actually performs better or not. I cannot tell you that this is always going to work better, this is always going to work worse, right? But think about that. This is going to, most of the time, this is going to work a little bit better. In the many ways, similar to what YouTube is doing, right? This is the most painful thing you can all think of. If you have a lengthy documentary and you want to jump back by 15 seconds to jump forward by 15 seconds, in the past, it was like this really, really difficult moving of the slider, right? I mean, obviously, they would be supporting keyboard navigation as well. But to make it a bit more trivial, I think they rolled it out now, finally, right? If you have a lengthy part, then you can actually scroll up this slider, like actually tap on the thumb, you scroll up, and then it changes the scale. So you can jump by 2 seconds forward and by 2 seconds back, right? That's quite incredible. So that's really, really powerful. Unfortunately, it's not really discoverable that easily. So you have to know that you need to tap and you need to scroll up, but they have a little hint now, which tells you scroll me up, right? So that's cool. And on the other hand, you can also do, your traditional keyboard navigation as well. That's fantastic. Right, that's really, really neat. Here's another pattern to use here, related again to touch. So when you think about complex structures that you might have in your e-commerce site, maybe you have a constructor of shelves or constructor of cars, anything like that. You have a lot of tiny details that people need to navigate, right? Well, what if you allow people to be a bit more comfortable in the selection? Like, you remember, you tap on 3 colors and then the speaker showed up, right? What about doing it a little bit going to make it a bit more helpful? For example, this is a really nice shelf configurator from Tilco. It's very responsive, it's beautiful, it has all the little fancy whistles and bells that you might want to have, right? It's really nice. It's just absolutely incredible, right? But then the really cool part for me is whenever you click on rows, you have this little assistant pattern showing up, right? Where you can select any particular piece, right? Be it a row or be it a column. So sometimes it's kind of bi-dimensional. So you can choose whatever it is that you actually want to get, right? That's much easier than just trying to zoom in and zoom in and zoom in and just zoom out and zoom out, right? So this can be very, very helpful. And it goes further than that, because if you try to think about this matrix pattern, there is one particular thing I would highly encourage you to test. That's really cool. Remember, if you want to buy, let's say, a TV, right? You're going to an e-commerce site, you're adding a couple of TVs for comparison, and then off you go, a beautiful feature comparison table, right? What if we forget this ever existed? What if we forget about feature comparison tables? Why do we need a table? Why don't we do something like this instead? This is product chart. Let's imagine you want to check a display. That's a feature comparison. What do we have here? Well, what do you want to do here? So you have this, again, this matrix pattern, the same story, right? Where we can say, hey, select, what do you want to see on the one axis? What do you want to see on the other? What do you care about? So weight, okay, and maybe, I don't know, something like pixels. Now, that's surely not for everyone. This is going to be used mostly for expert users who know what they need and they actually want to get there. So what you have here basically is, maybe you want to reduce the weight, right? And maybe you want to have a slightly more pixels, right? And you kind of navigate this space in a much more comfortable way. But of course, it's a little bit more advanced, I would say. Not every e-commerce site will be happy with that, right? But again, kind of the same pattern that we can now apply not only on mobile, but also on desktop, right? Now, all these things are, by the way, mentioned or kind of highlighted in some way by Stephen Huber in his article, Touch Design for Mobile Interfaces. But I highly encourage you to go ahead and explore that. That's actually pretty neat. All right, well, with this in mind, we definitely need to then go deeper and explore some things like, for example, the infamous, I guess, carousels. Let's apply it all in some way or the other to our wonderful, beautiful, incredible carousels. Is anybody excited about carousels in the house? Please write a plus in the chat. My goal for the next 7 minutes is to make you fall in love with carousels. Can I do that? Oh, that's a challenge. I don't see a lot of excitement in the house, but don't worry, we'll maybe get there. Well, what's the deal with carousels? Why do you dislike them so much? What did they do to you? Carousel didn't do much to you, right? Look at this beautiful carousel with a carousel in the background. That's fantastic. It's beautiful. It's fantastic, right? Well, not really. If we start looking around and we look into the data, and this is one of the typical carousels. We have the dots in between, have the arrow to the left, the arrow to the right, and then we have this area, which is kind of the carousel. And then we have the slides or slices of a carousel. Thank you for the wonderful emoji, Mike. That's incredible, right? So no, this doesn't work. This doesn't work at all. If you look at the data, how many people actually see position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the carousel? Position 1 seen by nearly 85% of people. Position 2. So it doesn't really work too well. Not surprising then.
Lee, could you repeat the last 5 seconds? You froze.
Oh, yes. Oh, damn it. I'm sorry about the connection. Right. So, okay, let's go back here. So again, position 1, 85%. Position 2, 3, 4, and 5, just around 2%. So not very successful. Not surprising then that it has been removed because it didn't work, right? But is it the fault of the carousel? Because when we start looking around in the world, and I have this really strange hobby of mine that every single Friday I pick a random industry and I pick a random country and I go and explore websites in that country. And I went and spent the entire weekend. And some people spend weekend with the loved ones. I spent weekends with carousels like this one's. This is a Turkish website called Sabah, and it has a lot of carousels, whatever you prefer in life. It has a horizontal example, a vertical example, one with thumbnails, and they never use dots anywhere. But not that many, right? Most of the time, sorry, I froze again, maybe. No, it seems to be working. No, most of the time it's just, numbers all over the place. Of course, there are some dots every now and again on mobile, but this is more like an exception than the rule. And then, of course, if you go to Millet, it's like it belongs to the museum of carousels in the world. Is there a museum like that? There should be one, because there is everything. One with thumbnails, one vertical, one horizontal, and the content slider, because why not, right? Fantastic. Carousel.com.tr would be a magnificent domain for this. So still, all right, we can replace dots with numbers. Why would we do that? When I asked in Turkey why they use numbers, they told me one thing. Well, we can reference to a slice or a slide or position in the carousel. I thought, do you need to do that? Well, we find it useful, I was told in one of the agencies. All right, so maybe we could do that, but maybe we could make it a bit better. Can you tell me what you would do here when you try to navigate this carousel? Now, this is a carousel, right? How would you try to navigate it? Now, what you have here is the slice of the carousel right here. So James would just close the tab. That is one way of doing that. But you also have this little carousel thing on the left. And so you have the numbers 1 to 6. You have the vertical line here, and you have the black dot in the middle. All right. So could you write whether you would just scroll down, or you would try to drag the slider, or you would click on one of the numbers? All right, I see drag, scroll. 2 people will leave the site. Oh, now 4 people will leave the site. James, you're really a trendsetter. You've always been. Ironically, this is not quite how it works. You can try to scroll, but it doesn't going to bring you anywhere either. Now, in fact, the way it works is a little bit different from what you may be expecting, right? You can try to click as much as you like on that carousel. You can click around, you can click on the dot, you can try to drag it. Nothing, and nothing yet again. In order to navigate the carousel, you need to, of course, swipe. You need to drag horizontally from right to left. Whenever you have a mismatch of where the slider is, how the slider is moving, and the orientation of the slider, you're going to end up with a big trouble. This is not what people are expecting, and there is no reason to do it this way. So one simple fix in here would be to just rotate it by 90 degrees, right? That would be it, basically, because this is a problem. And you might say, well, yeah, sure, this is such a rare thing. It happens all over. This is a Van Gogh museum from Netherlands. The same story. What you see here at the bottom, but maybe let me just go back for a moment, is scroll for more. How would you scroll for more here? It doesn't tell how to scroll, it just tells you to scroll. Well, if you parallaxing going on.
You froze again.
All right, damn it, I have to check it. Hold on, let me double check. What is my connection was so good all the time, dear friends. So sorry. Usually it's not like that. I promise. I have a good connection. I do. So many people want to get online, I guess. Sorry, dear friends. Everything was fine until the carousel part. Maybe that's a karma for me. Right. So in this case, what the problem is, you actually, whenever you start scrolling down, you are actually swiping horizontally, which is just really, really strange. This is not quite how it's supposed to be. So how can we fix it? Now, there is one simple way of fixing it. And in my experience, I have to say, this has always worked better. So remove the dots, forget about the dots, replace them with something that's actually more manageable. Just a simple slider. Just make it very clear that you have a slider, you can actually drag it, or you can swipe left and right. It works. There are no problems here. Or make it a bit better, because we can also replace maybe this slider with sort of labels. It kind of becomes less of a carousel and more of a tabbed experience, I guess. So you have labels on the bottom, which kind of point you towards what you have. So you actually have a reason to navigate through those things, right? And it can be more than that. For example, when you look at creativedenmark.com, it's different, because here what you get is kind of a hover menu for your carousel. So not only does every slice have a label, right? At the same time, it also kind of turns into this hover video preview, right? And then it kind of fades away to let you be and let you watch the video. That's better. So again, we're kind of adding some labels to it. On mobile, yeah, maybe I wouldn't do it this way, but maybe we can tilt it by like 35 degrees like we do with tables sometimes, things like that. Still fine. Maybe it could work too. But one thing I would tell you is, I would highly encourage you to do is replace the dots with something that's more meaningful. It could be labels, it could be thumbnails or photos, right? It could be icons that we have here on Philips. It could be anything like that. But one question that really bothered me for a very, very long time, and I couldn't find an answer, is not only what the dots should be replaced with, but the arrows. Right? These arrows we have on the left and on the right. Meaning of life is another one that really bothers me for a while now. But the arrows, where should the arrows leave? Should they be like this, one on the left and one on the right? Should they be grouped? Should they be at the bottom? Should they be on the top? Should they be in the middle? Do you have issues falling asleep when you encounter those kind of questions? I do all the time. So if I ask you now, let's have a vote. It's a democracy after all. Let's have a vote. So if you had to pick where those arrows should leave, should they be spread out like this and live in the center? So then please write center. Should they be grouped and leave under the carousel? Please write left. Should they be grouped and leave above the carousel? Then please write right. I think we don't have a unanimous answer to that, I'm afraid. Everybody seems to be choosing one or the other, probably based on the project you're kind of working on recently, maybe. Well, I have to tell you one thing. The one thing that works worst is the one in the middle. Why is that? Why does this one perform the worst? Again, I'm not trying to make fun of Zalando or any other websites doing that, but in my personal experience, right, it just doesn't work as well. Not clear, clickable, handbook. Yes, so there are a couple of issues here indeed. So one of them is, we know that people are really bad at hitting targets. That goes for icons of any kind. This icon is not necessarily very large. So what happens is, very often, accidentally, people click on the image, and of course, it will be driving them to a page. And then they have to return back, but then they might have lost the position in the carousel, right? Sometimes you also get to the position where you click too fast, right? So you kind of click twice maybe, but then you notice something interesting and you want to go back. And then people have to refocus, reorient themselves, and also reorient their thumb or the index finger to actually go back. And so that takes more time, right? But typically the more problematic part is that people just click in the image, right? That's an issue. I mean, also swiping is an option, of course, right? That goes without saying, but could be working for all of them, right? The second worst, or maybe the second best at this point, the second best would be actually this one. Mm-hmm. It also has some usability and accessibility issues. Like what? What's the problem here? Buttons very high, too small. The arrows are too close together. Yes, icons are far away to reach. Out of thumb zone. Yes, indeed, all of those things. The problem is, whenever you're hitting one of those buttons, right, it really depends on how far it is on the edges, because whatever you actually try to tap on them, you'll be covering some part of the carousel. And people need to do both. They need to be able to control the carousel and also see the content of the carousel. So depending on where it's positioned, right, you will have some portion of that carousel being covered by the thumb, or by the, not by the thumb, by the hand, right, which is kind of an issue. But in my experience, indeed, this one worked best, but it has another problem, one significant problem that needs to be resolved. And that would be, whenever people actually start getting to the carousel, sometimes they mightn't even notice that there is this way of going left and right, because they're just swiping down, they're just scrolling down very quickly. So there is a discoverability issue over here. So one way to solve it would be to make it sticky, for example. That kind of helps. Pref next. Or just make it positioned a little bit closer to the image at least, right? Maybe over here. Still, it will be covering some parts of this part right here. But in general, I would highly encourage you to not do this, right? Try maybe this, because it has higher discoverability. Or if you want to go safe, then this. This is solving all the issues, because your hand will never be able to cover the content, can move back and left and right. Think about remote control that you have on your TV, right? Buttons are not like miles away from each other, the buttons left and right. They're close, they're grouped, and they probably should be. I mean, I cannot tell you that this is always going to work better, but in my experience, it has worked much better. And again, talking about something that we're creating, which is universally accessible, this might work well. This might also work in other scenarios. Like, for example, oh, sorry, not that one. Like, for example, here, whenever we have news, right, and you have these cars and people slide left and right, you might want to group them as well, even although they are on the right together, right? And my reference example for anything carousels would be this one from ritual.com. I can type it in the chat. Ooh, I had to escape here. Ritual.com. I'm just going to type it in the chat so you can get there as well. It's a wonderful little site, by the way. Hold on. Now I'm back here. So what you have here is have a carousel. You can go left and right. These icons are grouped. Whenever you tap on one of them, you have this little overview showing up. It doesn't have to be a pop-up, but just an example here, right? So they are big. These buttons are huge. They're impossible to miss, right? And because they're on the top on desktop, the discoverability rate is high. And then whenever you go to the mobile view, it changes, right? So eventually, as you will see in a moment, it just jumps. And you see that on the smaller screens, these arrows are still grouped, and they're right under the carousel, and you kind of navigate from there. So that's how I would always design a carousel, right? At the bottom grouped right on the right-hand side on mobile, and then desktop above the carousel on the right. But it shows only one additional person. Carousel is not needed, right? Yes, Sylvester, you're right. But I mean, they used to have way more than that, and sometimes you can fit only 3 people, so you can actually tap twice. But you're right. You're totally right on that as well. And this grouping, by the way, is actually quite significant in other scenarios too. It doesn't have to be horizontal, it could be vertical as well. Here you have the same story, vertical. Whenever it's grouped, you will avoid people, covering content with their hands, which is always a good idea, right? So if I had to choose and I had to convince you to make a carousel, right, here's the checklist that I have for carousels. This is just a couple of things I keep in mind. Not going going to go through all of them, but I will give you a bit of information right here. And as a summary, well, we have to choose the sequence of slides carefully, because most of the time, that's something I've forgotten to show, by the way. Whenever you go to, let's say, I don't know, websites like booking.com, hotels.com, and something similar, or e-commerce sites, right? You will end up like, maybe it look like this, right? You will end up with a slightly different distribution. Remember the very first slide, like 85% see the first slide and the others do not. In reality, for product pages especially, it looks more like this. The first 3, 4, 5 slides get attention, but then it gets very kind of drops very significantly. But there is an exception, and the exception is something where people want to watch a lot of images, like again e-commerce, or let's say whenever you're booking a vacation, you want to see, and you will be going through almost every single image that exists on the page because you care, right? So you might want to get in that zone, and you might even have a higher actually viewing rates in there. So this is a summary, right? Choose a sequence of slides carefully. The further you go down, like the second slide gets more attention than the 18th, of course. It should not rotate too quickly. Usually 5 to 7 seconds is best if you have auto rotation, although it's a really big no-go. And typically what you want to avoid is, slow rotating too quickly, because then people just start skipping the carousel altogether, right? And the other hand is, if you do have auto advancing, then you also need to have a pause button. Otherwise, people abandon the carousel as well. Beyond that, whenever people start navigating with it or kind of working on it and hovering over it or interacting with it, we need to pause auto rotation, right? And we need to support swipe gestures. Ideally, we can also show a little bit of a slice of the following slide so people understand that something is in there, right? And then also provide information sent, which is basically replacing dots with labels or video previews or icons or thumbnails or anything that's more contextual. That's probably going to help more, right? Everybody still with me? Anybody fell in love with carousel yet? What about jumping to a random slide on Lord? Asks Martin. I would say yes, that helps to kind of prominently show the different positions of the carousel. But I would say, if the carousel is still not performing, then surely people will see the first slide and maybe they will see the second and third, that they will not go full circle. And we want to encourage them to do that more. So there, I would say labels definitely work better. What is that code called for auto detect? Oh, right. That was number 8, because sometimes you have the arrow, let's say white arrow on a white screen, on a white background, right? And that's just not accessible. People cannot tell that there is an arrow. So that's something that needs to happen. So if you have, let's say, one dark image with a black background and one white background, you might want to actually change the color and contrast of the arrow, or give it some sort of color that would be distinct, at least as a very minimum, which should live on the top of the carousel. Carlos is wondering, would it make more sense to do away with carousels and create sections that scroll past user? Yes, I would say that if you want to encourage people to explore proactively, you can do that. And people do scroll, but I would say that sometimes you get in the position where you want to highlight products which are grouped in some way or that have a meaning together. So if you have, let's say, like, I don't know, a bookstore website, and you have a lot of sections anyway, and then if you turn every single carousel slice into a particular section, separate section, just makes for a very long page, right? In general, I would say if you don't need a carousel, don't add one. It's not going to help you, right? But sometimes if you want to show, like, let's say, very different products, right, it might work. I mean, carousels don't necessarily perform poorly. So that's just something for us to keep in mind. What about carousels and pop-ups? Just no, Joseph, just no. Any recommendations on the height of a carousel? Sometimes ours are too big, a cutoff viewport. What you can do is track the size. So there is viewport height units. You can say, well, the height of my carousel is going to be on a 90 viewport height units, right? So it's always going to fit. And then the images, for example, will be scaling down. One thing that I saw once, but it doesn't really perform too well, is whenever you have a carousel and you have a kind of horizontal, or not scrollable area within it, that just not working. So I'm afraid that this is probably a no-go, right? Okay, I have more nightmares coming up. I mean, it's like we are now online for 52 minutes. I can go forever, and I can promise you that I will I don't know, I probably won't, but I can because we have 893 slides to go through. We don't have to go through all of them, right? But maybe let's do at least one more, and then we can jump into questions, and then we can do a little bit more if you're interested as well. And here, I think one really, really important thing is to look into a good friend of ours, because I promised as well, hamburgers, right? Hamburger menus and anything related to that. I will not make you fall in love with hamburgers, I promise. This is just not going to work, but I can point you to some issues that we can actually deal with, especially on mobile, when it comes to navigation. First of all, there is no hamburger. There are hamburgers. There are many of them. There is a big family of hamburgers all over the place, right? From hamburger to Oreos to kebab to candy box to chocolate to cheeseburger to hot dog to veggie burger to strawberry to fries to stairs to cake. You can just take them all in. Just pick your own flavor and decide what is it that you're going to use. Whenever you look at websites, of course, you will find the hamburger all over the place. Well, whatever you want to call it, of course, right? So you have it in Georgia, you have it in India, you have it in Israel, you have it everywhere. Like whenever you go, you will find hamburgers. Whenever you talk to a user navigating a site, click on the hamburger, they will have no idea what you mean. They just see it as a menu, unless they're experienced, of course, right? So that's there. But sometimes you find slightly extraordinary hamburgers, I would say. Here is my favorite example ever. So let's count how many hamburgers we've got, right? Can you tell me the difference between all the different hamburgers? Wolfgang is not amused at all, and Anna isn't either. So I promise you a little bit of frustration right here. So do we know the difference between the menu, the menu, the menu, and also the menu? This website is kindly provided and powered by the wonderful city of Eindhoven in Netherlands, which has an incredible, really, really tasty coffee lab, has nothing to do with hamburgers, which is a little bit sad. Oh, I froze yet again. Oh, sorry, my friends. So the website has nothing to do with hamburgers, right? But yeah, there are plenty of them. And of course, if you actually have to navigate it, right? Well, there are all kind of different menus. Some of them are sticky, some of them are not. Now let's explore. Which one would you like to click first? Anybody? Preferences? Right. Menu. Okay, we have the menu on the side, the different options, and we have the product menu. And then we have a social media menu. And then we have just the menu, which is just the label, I guess. So here we go. We've got them all in one single place. But surely we can try to make it maybe just a little bit better. So how can we do that? Well, we can do that by looking specifically into some ways of how we usually design them. So if we take a look at these three examples, here on the left, this is very typical, not necessarily hamburger, but just the menu button. And if we start looking and exploring it, right, just maybe look at it for a moment and tell me if you notice something weird happening here. Right? So there is a lot of movement going on here, but we need to be kind of really careful of how we play it, right? So let me play it again, but this time on desktop. I hope I have the video here. Maybe I don't. I think I did. I think I have it. Hold on just for a moment, dear friends. I'm coming here. Now I've lost it. That's okay. That's fine. We'll be getting without it then. So if we start looking around, this is what happens actually quite often, right? So we click on the menu, and what I tend to do, and this is really helpful for me, I always go frame by frame to see exactly what has happened, right? So we click on the menu, the navigation comes up from top to bottom, right? Kind of sliding in. All right. Now I click on Christmas lectures. At this point, I will have no idea whether I'm going to go in the section or whether I'm going to go to the page. I just don't know. Okay, so now if I choose, let's say, to click on one of them, let's say I'm going to education, I see this happening, this sliding in from right to left, where I see education on the left and I see education on the right. Can you tell me the difference between them? Daniel is saying one is item and the other is header, right? However, it still doesn't have an arrow now. But now some items do have an arrow. So here, no arrow. Okay. Here, no arrow either for education. Okay. But then we have other arrows now showing up, like, for example, next to master classes. So what does that arrow mean? Oh, let me put it differently. Not like who cares what it means. What would you expect to happen when you click now on, let's say, master classes? It could be a submenu, or it could be kind of a drop down. Some people would expect to go to master classes. Why? Well, because here we're just clicking and we're going into a level. And if there is an icon, the experience must be different, probably, hopefully, maybe, right? Okay, let's click on one of them. Let's click at master classes. We click on master classes and we have this again sliding in experience. And now we have master classes on the top, also without an icon. But then we'll also have other options like get involved, our networks, and so on, right? Okay, and let's click on one of them. Maybe, I don't know, our networks, or get involved, and we get into another level. Okay, and now we can go to the next level, like let's say, I don't know, helpers. But now it goes to the page. That's a little bit confusing. I mean, we went from level 1 to level 6 at this point, and it was very, very confusing. It's in fact a mega menu that we kind of don't want to have. Now, surely you can say, well, that's just bad design. That's just ridiculous. Like, let's take a look at Decathlon. Decathlon is a much better design in this case because we have a contrast between level 1, level 2, level 3. So whenever you go to, let's say, level 2, all right, it looks different. That's good, right? You go to the next level, okay, it looks different. Okay, but then still you have these arrows. And then whenever you click on the arrow, now it goes to the page, right? There is no consistency on the web around what it's supposed to do and what not, right? The problem is here you also have an arrow, and you tap on that arrow, and you still have an arrow. So you kind of get the same story. It's just a little bit better design, right? So difficult. Well, we'll see in a moment how we can actually fix that. Here's another example from Lamborghini. So we have a similar experience, but it's different. So whenever you start going, you go in and go in and you go in, and then eventually the last step is changing the transition, changing the interaction to an accordion. So it's slide in, and then accordion, right? At least it's very, very clear at this point that the interaction has changed, right? First of all, I have to admit that if I have a choice, I would never, ever, ever, ever propose to do this slide in. This slide in is the worst navigation pattern you can have. It works because it's flexible. You can put a lot of stuff in there, right, in your content area and have a lot of navigation in there. It can be extremely confusing. It slows down people. It's also irritating because something comes from right to left all the time. And the worst part, whenever people want to go back from one section to maybe the previous level and then navigate from there, they always have to go back to go forward. And that's just slow. And if you know me, you know that I'm a big fan of another pattern that works much, 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 much better. And that would be accordions. So whenever we look at Decathlon here, it's kind of the same story, right? So I'm not going to probably show this too much. It's kind of, but at least it looks different, right, on the last level. But then when you look in New England Journal of Medicine, kind of the same story, but also looks different, right? So it just looks different. It's very, very clear where the first level is, where the second level is. But for me, my personal reference example would be Allianz website for navigation on mobile. You have level 1, you have level 2, you have level 3. You can jump between level 2 if you want to very, very quickly. You can actually close level 1 from level 3, right? This is something that no other pattern can do, right? And in this point, in this case, they also show they use a bit of indentation, a bit of color contrast, a bit of typographic contrast. That seems to be working just fine, right? So if I had a choice, I'll probably do this. In details, this looks like this, right? You have this option on the left where something is closed, and then you have this kind of expanded, right? The only issue is that sometimes you get to multiple levels of those chevrons, which can be a little bit confusing as well, but we'll get to it in a moment. All right, there are some patterns which I highly encourage you to use and try. One of them is vertical layering. So whenever we're looking at navigation like this, we often think about, okay, the menu shows up and then we have this screen. So how now I need to go to level 3, right? So, and dear friends, please bear with me, like maybe 10 more minutes, and then we can jump into Q&A, and you can ask all the questions that you want. So what we can do here is, instead of driving people to a separate page, or even opening an accordion, although accordion would be my first choice still, you can always have a vertical split like this. This is gold. I don't see why it's never used at all. And even if it contains, like, say, a longer label, it can still fit. No problems here. So this allows you, compared to the previous example, to jump very quickly between multiple levels. Now, surely if you have, let's say, 15 items, it's not going to work. But I'm wondering, would it be then better maybe to just have show all button and then just go straight to the page if you need 15 items right here? So surely if you want to also go into localization and internationalization issues, that might become a bit difficult. But it's maybe fine for your case, or it might not be, right? That's something that you will be encountering. And you will see that this is actually applied in many different places. So this is one in the US for the Institute for Faith, Work and Economics. Kind of the same story, right? Whenever you actually explore the navigation, they allow you to jump very quickly from level 1 to level 2 or level 3. Right? It just those icons are really, really small. So that's kind of an issue, right? So I'll just get into it in a moment. Then here on cancer decay, we have this other story where we have kind of a dashboard almost. So you can actually jump in from one level to the next, and then it would expand, but they actually changed it recently, right? And then you also get this curtain pattern on PlayStation, where you give people, again, access to the first level and access to the second level without having to go back. You just go forward all the time. Right, so that's pretty neat. And it can be applied in so many other scenarios as well. This is one of my favorite e-commerce sites. This is coming from India, and I don't remember how it's called, to be honest. But this is what it looks like. You have this kind of sorting button and filter button at the bottom left. You click on them, you have the sorting bottom sheet showing up. But then it's really cool what they decided to do on filters. Whenever you click on filters, you get this vertical split here as well. So you have all your filters over here. And then you have a scrollable area along with a search, I can say by color, right here as well, and sticky, close, and apply button. It's Mintra, exactly. Thank you so much for reminding me of that. That's great. Why is it that we never have that? And somebody, could you please mute if possible? Right. So that's really cool. I mean, I would love to see more filters that look more like we see on the right. Right. If you're not speaking, could you please mute yourself? Okay, perfect. Thank you. This also goes for many other scenarios as well. Let me give you a preview of what we usually do in our trainings. Oh my, I think we have some people here from the training, so they'll be excited. Let's imagine you have to redesign this. This seems like a simple enough exercise, isn't it? Unfortunately, you don't see most of it just yet. You also get to see this. These are 69 filters, right? And you have 424 rows in a table. This is one of the most popular financial visualizations websites in the world. And Sherry says it's beautiful. This is extremely popular. This is the top interface that's used by experts who are doing nothing else but exploring how market is moving, kind of managing their portfolios and things like that in that UI, right? Now, when you start looking around, you can see that there is a lot of options here. Every single thing here is a dropdown, including pagination. There is a reason why we ended up looking into pagination early on for dates, right? Would you like to scroll through 424 pages like this? Maybe not, maybe not necessarily, right? So how would we fix that? Now, there are issues with tables. We probably can't go into it in details, but it's actually covered in a lot of detail here. I'm going to talk about it in just a moment, right? But here, we have a very simple solution that always works. Always works. It never failed me. That's incredible. We go ahead and just say, let's this entire block, right? Because we are the masters of the internet. We can do whatever we want, right? So let's just delete it all. Can we do that? Let's just delete this entire table. Oh, it's much better, isn't it? Just much better. But we need to replace it with something. And we can replace it with one incredible pattern that is heavily, just works really, really well. And that's been discovered or being built by Financial Times. Same problem, different solution. So, and I'll show in a moment, what does the mobile version look like? It actually is not responsive, really, I'm afraid. So what do they do? Well, this is what it's going to look like. So this entire set of filters that you have on the other website, right? It's structured and broken into groups. So let's go and define those filters. So we have Europe and we have one click. Again, it's the same story. It's this vertical split. It actually really works well. So you pick Estonia because we have a lot of wonderful Estonian friends over here. And we take Luxembourg because we have Stephanie coming from Luxembourg here and a lot of Dutch friends, I'm sure, as well, right? Here we go, selected. Next, you go to sector and industry. Energy, alternative energy. I like that. Healthcare providers, musical equipment, and so on. No drop downs, because drop downs are the slowest mode of interaction, right? Yeah, you just click through whatever it is that you need, you choose, and then you get to this complex part. Remember, like, okay, we have to delete it now, we have to bring it back. All those different values over here, every single thing that we have here needs to be fixed. So how can we do that? Well, why don't we allow people to first select a filter and then select a value for that filter? So it's almost like a search for filters or filter for filters. So what do? Well, we'll have some important ones, the top ones that are highlighted here can also be removed, but you can also add and change criteria. How? With the vertical split, of course. You choose the category, boom, then choose the criteria, boom. You choose another category, boom, choose criteria, boom, right? And efficiency, criteria, boom, boom. And you also have some defaults, which kind of show you the values that you need to have. And so when you actually start using it, right, you will see that it also has some little things like this, which gives you distribution of values and things like that. It's very nice. It's really, really beautiful. So you don't even have to type it unless you want to. So we can really easily transform these filters, because they are already grouped by descriptive, fundamental, technical, and so on, into 3 or 4 parts like this. And that's it. How would it work on mobile, you might ask? And yes, AG grid is actually very, very good. Or is it AgGrid? So the one that's mentioned in the chat, it's really nice. So how would it work on mobile? The same story. There is nothing different. It's exactly the same. It's almost mobile first kind of solution right here. And that's it. Accordions, but you expand one, you say, oh, don't need that one, don't need that one, don't need that one. They want to add or change criteria, accordion within an accordion. We open, we go into where we need to go, click, done, right? It's so much better. Now, the question is, how would it work accessibility-wise, right? Well, first of all, of course, you need to kind of make sure that you are working kind of that the entire thing is keyboard accessible. So that means that whenever you actually go and tap through the filters, like add or change criteria, you enter stock metrics, and then you need to be able to tap to the next one, which is going to be DX short selling activity, institutional percent held, and then you tap again, and you need to be able to close it or return back, right? So accessibility-wise, it's it can be solved. It's actually not that complicated. We just need to track focus where people are, right? So again, just that pattern is remarkable. It works really, really, really well for many different things, actually. Just a few more minutes and then I'm done. I can really do this forever. I hope you enjoyed this as well, dear friends. Let's take a look at a few other things which are really, really frustrating. One of them, literally like 5 minutes, and that's it. I actually shared the slides already. They're already on the Google Drive, so you can go ahead and download them. That's no problem at all, right? So World Trade Organization, right? And they have a lot of navigation and sections in the navigation, right? And one thing that obviously helps whenever you look on the right, it's really kind of confusing and it's difficult to see what is what and so on. Just a bit of color contrast would be enough, right? So whenever you're going, let's see, let me go to here. Whenever you just add a little bit of contrast, here again, comparing them side by side, right? That's all you need to do to make it very, very clear where is the first level, where is the second level, where is the third level. But there is also one more thing that you can do, and that's the last one I'm going to show. And that's called the billboard pattern. And the billboard looks like this. Now, my favorite site, it actually works on desktop as well. Probably my favorite site ever is the koreanpost.co.kr. It's literally koreapost.go.kr. It's incredible. I don't speak Korean, but I had a moment with my Korean websites. I love it so much. Look at this beauty. It's great. It's almost like a Microsoft called and they decided to change it to tiles, right? But that's great, because what they do is they show the most important top tasks, the most important critical areas, and things that people need to do like this in a dashboard, right? Almost like a dashboard. Somebody wants to have a translation. All right, let's do this. Something like this, right? And that's just incredible, right? Because you actually get right where you need to go. Dashboard, billboard, right there. There is a carousel. Yeah, sure, there is a carousel. But actually, most of the things that you really want to do, they're not necessarily in this huge navigation here, but they're right here, right in front of you. And that's kind of the billboard. They do the same thing here on mobile as well. But they also do the same thing, you can find the same thing on other websites too. Like, for example, whenever you go to the post, I like postal service websites. Anybody likes postal service websites? They are fun. Well, this is a great hobby for Friday night. I highly encourage you to go to yours. So in here, I think it's in Austria, you kind of highlight the most important things at the bottom as well. And then as you start going further, for example, if you look at e-commerce retailers, you will often find those kind of things. Like the first level is more like a billboard, where you have this is one of the sections, this is another section. It's not like you see on the right, which is a deeper level, but the first level needs to be engaging and attractive, right? But you do not do this too attractive, right? Because if you combine, and I'm sorry if you are working on this site, but if you have so many arrows all pointing to different directions, and sometimes also chevrons, you're just getting a little bit too much. That's maybe doesn't work. Sometimes you see websites trying to do this, kind of solve it differently. Whenever we have many different arrows or levels, you have the first level, which is a chevron on the left, right? And then on the right, you have a plus and minus, right? But then you also have nested pluses here. It might get a little bit confusing over time. You might not necessarily need more than 3 levels, really, right? And then also sometimes you get this, which is actually quite common, right? Whenever you start navigating, you see this little chevron almost on the left, right? And you have this kind of visual separator, a vertical separator. Usually the way it's done is this icon here leads directly to a page. Oh, sorry, this icon opens another menu, and this one is a link to the category. That's usually trouble. Whenever you try to combine too many actions, it's usually going to be trouble. One thing I would highly recommend to do instead is whenever somebody wants to open that menu, the garden and rights, right? Instead of trying to separate the action, like having a link here and having opening another submenu over here, just make sure that the entire thing opens a submenu as an accordion, right? And then within it, you can link directly to the gardens and rights page, something like the garden and rights home or anything like that. That's going to work much better because many people expect that the entire bar does one single thing and use underlines for those sub-actions. So it's subsections. So it's very clear that this is actually a link, right? But in general, you will find, again, those kind of things all over the place, like where you just, these are the kind of the billboard, if you like all over. This is actually quite common. Final one is breadcrumbs. That's really the last one. I really was extremely exhausted and sad the moment I discovered this. Like, why on earth would you flip the arrows for breadcrumbs? What did they do to you? And sometimes I just don't get it. You get these sites, right, where you have a disabled breadcrumbs. What did breadcrumbs do to you so you made it disabled? Why would you make a breadcrumbs disabled? Let people go if they want to go back, right? That's just so sad, actually. And sometimes it's just a bit confusing. It's kind of breadcrumbs, but it's also more than that. So it's kind of options for Prime Video. So you have also Netflix now and others. And I have an option that works remarkably, like really much better. Most of the time, breadcrumbs really painful. Very important, but also very painful. Like those things that you have on the left, sometimes you have multiple layers of going back. They're just too frustrating. There are a few things. One thing that always works, and this is what I want you to remember, if you have, if you struggle with something and you want something to work, always try an accordion. Accordions are the best. They almost always work. So accordion for breadcrumbs, sure, why not like that? So this is a European Commission website. I wasn't working on that one. But essentially, you have this breadcrumb here. So you can click on it and it's going to expand and show you the entire breadcrumbs path. Not very obvious. I agree with that. right? So you might actually want to make it a bit more look like a button. But then the entire world changed for me when I discovered this, which is ADAC, which is a German insurance company, right? Can you guess what this is on the top? Can you write in the chat? What is this? Power breadcrumb, says Craig, and it is power breadcrumb. It's kind of navigation. Think about sidebar turned into an additional drop down within breadcrumb, right? So as I now go down, or go back up, right? I click on it. Here's the navigation that I get. So I can jump between the different siblings of this page, right? And I don't know about you, when I saw this, I thought my world has changed now forever. I'm never going to be the same person ever again, because this can be used everywhere. And I mean it. And when you start looking around, you will find it in many places. So this is the city of Düsseldorf in Germany, and they kind of have the same thing as well. But they don't do it on the last item, but on the central item. I was like, that's interesting. And then I found this, which is the best website ever. I hope that you will bookmark it and you will go to it every Sunday because it's so good. It's a federal administration of a Swiss consideration for the Federal Statistical Office in Switzerland. It's so good. It's really nice. And they went all the way. This is like power breadcrumb, because actually every single section you have on the top here is a breadcrumb, but also a drop down. So do we need big menu if we can do this at all? We basically combine a breadcrumb into, with a mega drop down menu if you need one, and that's it. That's great. I mean, I would highly encourage you to try that. So if you struggle with something maybe like this, where you need to show some siblings or anything like that, right? Those kind of pattern can be really, really working well. They actually made because I'm going to them like literally every Sunday maybe now. They actually changed it now. And so you actually have them operating on every level, also not only on the level of the, where the site lives, but also on the level of where it is located, where a particular page is located. All right, wrapping up here. I mean, I can do this forever, but I want to leave it to questions as well. We can do some really incredible things on the web. Oh, this is the wrong one. Really incredible things. Even the weirdest things ever can be fun, like this. Just look at this freaking pop-up. There is nothing better in the world than this pop-up. I wish every single website had this pop-up everywhere. It's so annoying. It's so frustrating. I can't forget it. It's incredible. It's so nice. It should be on every single site out there. And sometimes you get these pages, what is your date of birth? And you're like, oh, this is so sad and boring. And just make it more interesting to people. It's easy. So you go to Austin Beer Works and you're being asked, are you 21? And if you are, excellent, you proceed. But if not, well, let's have a conversation, right? Let's ask you a couple of questions right here. And let's keep going, and let's ask a few more questions maybe, and maybe a few more questions, and eventually just getting ridiculous, right? And this is easy to do. This is not a big, it's not like a big design exercise. It's really easy to do, but it creates an incredible emotional connection if somebody actually discovers this, right? Feels like a gem when you actually think about that. That's really, really nice, right? And then, of course, eventually there is no way to click yes. You just have to proceed with no. That's it. Right? And then you get a character right there that you can speak to if you like to. And then sometimes you think about those things, right? This is so boring. What can be more boring in the world than the title? Title is probably the most boring thing ever, right? Not if you make it funny or interesting. Why don't we make it a bit more exciting? Like, who would you like to be today? Like, do you have a preference? Would you like to be a princess, a professor, or I don't know, squadron leader or anything like that? Just go for your whatever it is that you like. And then, of course, once you pick one, right, you're going to be greeted with a particular message that's going to come your way in a post by the postal service. Postal services, very, very cool companies in general, right? Greeting you as a princess. How cool is that? And they have 50 free options in there. That's incredible. And sometimes it's not a bad idea to just let people, do things slowly. So this is a very famous, of course, avatar, but I had to show it because it's so cool. I can just look at this character trying to be very respectful in me typing my email address and then hiding, kind of not picking at least as I'm typing my password and then still picking if it needs to be happening, right? That's great. That's absolutely fantastic, right? And sometimes it's fine if you just make people wait a little, just a little. So maybe we should make people think just a little bit so they have a chance to connect with you, with your brand. That's actually pretty powerful, right? And even those things, like think about a toggle. Like I think you can find some incredible inspiration in everything. There is nothing more inspiring than a toggle that works unexpectedly. So if you want somebody to sign up for your newsletter, right? And you really do want to sign up for your newsletter, maybe make them work a little bit harder for this, right? So maybe they should be typing or clicking not just once, but something like 15 times, right? To actually sign up for that newsletter. That probably wouldn't work for every single e-commerce site, right? But this would create potentially a very incredible connection between you and your brand, right? All right, with this in mind, I have cats and I have more cats and I have also just a few slides and things prepared. Thank you for being here. I'm here for whatever time is needed to answer all your questions, and we can also go into more details on specific topics. But just before you all go, one thing I wanted to show here is that, of course, you will find all the slides, all of them right here in the Google Doc. I'm going to paste the link to the Google Doc right here. So everybody gets access to it as well, right? You also find a video recording that will be added, once we're done and finished here, right? And also, I just want to kindly remind you, so this is just a very small portion of what we're doing, but if you take a look, if you have a chance to just look around and see if you actually want to get this entire video course, which is 8 hours of this and a lot more, and it's actually overgrowing library. There's 5 new videos, around 15 minutes each, added every 5 times a year. So there's a lot of stuff already in there, and there is more stuff coming in this year as well. So if you want to, I'd be happy if you find it interesting. There's also a training that we provide as well. This is, imagine things like that, but then 8 sessions with 2.5 hours each, where we do actual exercise, where we actually are redesigning this to make sure that it actually works better, right? That's where some people are really, really challenged, and I saw incredible results coming from this. That's really, really nice, wonderful to see. But for now, that's good, that's enough. I'm up for your questions, so please go ahead. Let me maybe jump in here to see what happens here, if there are any questions now. But let me go ahead. Maybe you could just write questions right here or in the chat, whatever works best for you, right? I'm here whenever, as long as the last person is in here in this room. And thank you so much for coming, everyone who needs to leave now.
Thanks, Vitaly.
Thank you so much, everyone. So any questions, dear friends? What to deal with hamburger menu on desktop? Oh, Sven, this is a question that I ask myself like all the time. This is just remarkable, because I think we often think that we need to use a hamburger menu. I would say this actually comes back to a very old presentation by Luke Wroblewski. He was giving these presentations about on Google sessions, where he was saying one thing. Whenever you, this is the one actually. I'm going to paste the link over here. Eventually, right, I think eventually he's going into all the fine details around hamburger menus right here. Whenever you hide your content behind the hamburger menu, you should not be expecting more people coming there. You will actually see a lot of people not understanding how that works and where it is. The same goes for search, right? So whenever you hide anything, it is going to be a problem. So it's actually reasonable to show content, to show as much navigation really as you can. So there is, I probably won't be able to find it quickly, but maybe I will actually, if you allow me to, just briefly. So hamburgers here. I think I have it here. No, I don't think I have it in this deck. But essentially the idea was, if you have, let's say, a search icon and you have a hamburger icon, what you would be expecting is that people understand how search works and people understand how menu works. That is true, they do. That's not a problem. The issue is, whenever you have a search icon instead of a search input box, right, you will have fewer people searching. Now, you might not want people to search. That's fine. But if you want people to search, you make the search box front and center, and you make it under the logo so people can actually find it very quickly, and they would have autocomplete and all of that so people will search. But if you don't want people to search that much, then you would have an icon, or you would put it behind the menu button, right? The same goes for navigation items. Whenever we look in something like The Guardian, right, and we'll look specifically at the navigation here, right? There is a good reason why many news websites do not hide everything behind hamburger menu, but they would do this. We have the first level of navigation, the second level of navigation, it can also expand, so you can see more, right? There is surely everything available on here as well, right? So you can go ahead and click and go through all the other sections, right? But it would be a disaster for the website to hide navigation here, because this is important. These are the reasons why a website exists in the first place. So if you want people to be exposed to what is available on the site, you want to increase clicks, right? You need to show navigation, right? And sometimes I get that we kind of don't show navigation just because on desktop, because there is not enough space to show all of the navigation, but I would at least show parts of it. It's still better than not showing anything. Right. Hey, I want to improve my UX skills. Can you guide me how I can do that? There are plenty of resources out there, actually. I think one good place to start would be Stephanie has a lot of incredible stuff around resources on anything UX-wise. So you just have to find where these resources are. I think it's here. So that would be a really nice start, actually. There are plenty of really useful links on everything, so I would highly encourage you to go there. Claire is wondering, do you feel like scale causes issues? It seems on some sites the items like the search box is so large, people see it as a design element and not as an actual functional element. I would say it's a matter of priorities. So I see sometimes that there are no clear priorities at all of what matters and what not. Now, if I just may go into this example, because I've been working on it for such a long time now, the European Parliament site has a lot of different sites, like 138 of them. And one of the major exercises that we had to do was to find what matters and what doesn't, and then prioritize what matters and deprioritize what doesn't. Very often we just think, oh, we just need to highlight what is important and show everything else. We actually might need to deprioritize what is not important as well. So if I again compare it, let's say, to how it could be, if I know that there are let's say 10 tasks that people tend to perform on the European Parliament website, I would go ahead and say, oh, well, maybe we should be doing something like this. Let's make these top tasks front and center of the experience. And then there is the rest. There is a lot of the rest, really, but let's make it front and center. So if that's the thing. In the same way, like it can actually comparable to what GovUki does, right? This is gold, right? This is so good, really, it really is. So there is a search box, sure, but there's also Popular on GovUK where we're highlighting what is important right now. That's it. So this is like this billboard pattern again, right? You're kind of highlighting what matters now. There is everything else as well. And there is a lot of stuff in here too, right? But in fact, there's no mega menu here. This are like what, 15 links, maybe 20, maybe 20, right? There's no subsections where you have to kind of expand and then you have to go in and then you have to expand another one. Just go straight ahead, right? And then of course, once you get to that section, you get navigation for that. But still you have this quite predictable choices, like 6 choices and you move forward, and more choices and you move forward. There's a lot of kind of beauty in that simplicity here as well. So sometimes we just tend to hide things that are important and add things that are less important, creating mega menus. Not everybody can pull off the incredible work that GovUK has done. It was incredible amount of resources and work done, but still that's quite worth kind of exploring and noting. How did you find out what matters? I would say I was working with top task methodology, which is actually quite famous now, because Jerry McGovern he's a colleague of mine, he's working with me. He has created this top task methodology on how to find out what matters and deprioritize what doesn't. He also wrote an article on smashing recently, actually. Yeah, that one. So that would be a really good start for you to explore. This usually, just to really quickly explain it, to prioritize what matters, we go ahead and we explore what do people do on the site, right? So we have a bunch of tasks that people do on the site. Then we go ahead and we do the voting with people who actually users of the site, where they vote on things and features that are most important to them in their work, right? Then we have this kind of priorities in place. Then out of that, we say, okay, we have top tasks, the most important ones, right? And we need to do kind of sort of card sorting because we need to turn them into navigation. Then we do card sorting. We have a couple of groups now. Every group is going to become an item in the navigation. We need to find the label, then we do a workshop with people who are using the site, right? Not us, because I have no idea about European Parliament, but people who are using the site to find out what the label, what is a representative label for that particular section, right? And then we highlight it as a navigation item, and then it's probably going to be, a drop-down menu, right? Where we have maybe 5 sections in each kind of main category. And then if you want to get more, you have view more button, a view all button. And this is how we prioritize what matters. It's actually quite straightforward. Can you suggest a few examples to show design investment or financial report? Investment financial report. I have a bunch of stuff around sliders. I think if you maybe send me an email, you will also find my email over here. I think I can find it. I just don't have it right here in front of me, Anurag. So if you have that particular question, please send me a message. I'll try to find it. How do you balance what matters to the users to what the company wants them to do? For example, in e-commerce, how do you want to balance what you want to sell to what the customers want to buy? That's usually, I would say, a compromise. So my job most of the time is to figure out what is important to users. And then we get into a workshop room with stakeholders, and then we have to make decisions. Surely some things need to be there because they need to be there. Surely some things need to be prioritized because there's a business goal behind it, which I'm not aware of, and maybe that the users are not aware of. So my job then becomes not only to find out what users actually do, what they need and what they want to do, but also find a way to help business reach their goals, right? While at the same time not letting down users. This is kind of the, I think, in some ways also one of the important things that I try to do. Any insights on data visualization alternative to tabular data? Yes, there is this a really great guide, data viz guide. I think maybe it's even this one. I mean, I like design systems. No, that's not the one. I like design systems for this kind of things. For example, there are 2 really neat ones on data visualization specifically. There is Kaizen, and there is also IF. So I'm going to drop in links over here, Moxie, for you. So they have like really decent guidelines on that. But there is also the gold mine. Like this is the best website I found in years. This is called Component Gallery. Oh, yes, Dave, very good. This is the one I was looking for. Thank you so much for bringing this up. This is like the best thing on earth. It's unbelievable. So this is a reference which is basically sorted by components. So imagine you're working on a particular component, you don't know how to name it, you don't know how to build it, you don't know how to design it. You go ahead in Component Gallery, and it basically scouts and searches for all the different design systems out there and groups them by components. So for example, I have a big passion for accordions, as you could tell. So there are 86 examples of accordions in different systems, right? In Undesign, in Auro, and Backpack by Skyscanner, and Bolt, and BBC Global Language, and so on. And I can say, oh, okay, accessibility, that's interesting. I do care about accessibility for the project here, for sure. And so it kind of shows how it works, how it's built, documentation, the different states, and all of that. So you can use it as a inspiration because I also have variations of that component, right? And accessibility and rules and guidelines, that's great. I spend at this point at least 1 hour of my day and my time every day on this site. It's just incredible. It's all the wonderful examples, both from the markup perspective and the design perspective. Do you have any resources, books, videos, or courses on how to do an UX audit step by step? There is also checklist.design, right, which contains a lot of checklists on everything. Let's see if we can find. There's also a one on UX. Again, if you could send me an email, I probably would be able to find it. There is a lot of stuff Yeah, probably will be able to find it. Unfortunately, I can't find this. Oh, yes, maybe that one, but I think it was actually quite short. Oh, no, maybe that was that one. No, I think there was another one, actually. If you send me an email, I'll be able to find it. Jason said, you mentioned that even you had to convince European Parliament stakeholders that you know what you are talking about when it comes to what UI works and doesn't. Do you handle that by showing videos or results from user testing? Do you show other statistics? I'm curious how you dealt with an organization of that size. I have to admit that, my managers are incredible, but the thing is, whenever you get to an organization like that, and I'm sure that many of you are working in enterprise UX as well, right? You will end up in a situation where things are just getting kind of beyond your control. So you're reporting to somebody, but that person reports to somebody else, and you might have a big hierarchy in place. So you find it maybe difficult to convince anybody of anything. That was when I kind of encountered my story. So I really, and I mean, I want to emphasize it one more time, I really find a lot of value in setting up design KPIs targets for my work. So before I start, I have to prove that the work that I'm doing brings the organization forward. And that means I need to understand what are their KPIs. And then I need to frame my design KPIs as an enabler of us getting to better KPIs in the organization. And so what it usually means is, well, I need to know, like, what do we want to do in terms of accessibility, right? Okay, we want to be AA compliant. All right, because this is coming from the very top. All right, we're going to do that. I would love to try AAA, but that's fine. I can do that too. Web performance, what do we want to do there? And it's very difficult kind of for a manager to say, oh, I don't care about performance. I want good performance. Performance is not so important to me. That doesn't happen. The same goes for accessibility. The same goes for SEO. The same goes for many other things. So once I get this commitment saying we care about accessibility, we care about performance, we care about maintainability, we care about flexibility of our code base, and we also care about sustainability, I need to frame those things as design decisions, right? So then I'm going to go ahead and say, all right, we did this with images, or we did this with fonts because of these 5 goals that we wanted to achieve early on. We still want to achieve them, right? We still are very much, compliant and focused on accessibility, performance, and all those things. So I always try to argue about the value. And that value is very, very important. This is why for those KPIs, for example, I try to advocate why those things are important for them, right? So for example, again, for the European Parliament's case, accessibility, why is it important in that project? Well, because according to the strategy for the rights of persons with disabilities by the European Commission, 87 million people in the European Union have some form of disability. This number doesn't account for any kind of temporary or situational disability. It's worth noting that 28.4% of persons with disabilities are at risk of poverty or social exclusion, according to that data, compared to 70.8% of persons without disabilities. By making our assets and resources fully accessible, we make the content accessible universally, right? It's very hard to disagree with that statement. It's also very hard to say we don't care, right? Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to do research to find out that, this goal that I have in front of me is very much aligned with the goals that the European Parliament has, right? And then I'm actually spending quite a bit of time trying to frame it in the proper way. Keith, I don't think I can share it just yet, but if you send me a message, maybe, I don't know, in a few weeks, it's probably going to be possible. Good to have you here, by the way, Keith. What is the best way to display graphs on mobile and on desktop? Okay, graphs is an interesting story. I have this, I'm kind of trying to see and track what the Guardian is doing. And for the midterm elections in the US, they had this really nice combination of things that they were doing. So typically what you will find is charts going like, data visualization. But they don't necessarily do that. Instead, they kind of break it down into sections like that, which I found quite interesting. It's not the first time that they did that, but and maybe other websites, of course, do that as well, right? But there is quite a few interesting things in here which are kind of well designed. So I don't really have to look at the geographical map necessarily, or even on the data specifically, but I can track instead those kind of trends, I would say, that surely will, of course, work on mobile as well, right? So now we're going into this area just works, right? For charts in general, though, I would say, if I have to think about it, probably going to be difficult to find some specific examples now. I would say one thing that often works, I just probably won't find an example for that now, is whenever you have, let's say, a lot of data, sometimes it helps to flip the axis. So if you have something on one axis and something on the other, you might be better off to actually flip them. If you think about the consumption of energy, let's say, usually it would be going from top to bottom, and that would be very difficult to make work on mobile. So you can always flip it. Or you can tilt it, maybe not necessarily flip it, but tilt heading by like 35 degrees or so. That helps you win some space. Because while on desktop we have a lot of horizontal space, on mobile we have a lot of vertical space. So you can try to make kind of use of that, right? Do you have any tips and tricks on tables? Yes, I do. There is, I think, 2 hours on tables in the video course, if I'm not mistaken. But specifically, when you look into data tables, I would say, let me see if I can show it right away. That's probably going to be the last one, last example here. Just a second, let me see where it is. I think it's over here. All the table stuff, yes. So as you can see, there's a lot of stuff around tables here. I think I would highly encourage you to try this pattern. That works really well. So imagine you have a lot of columns, you have a lot of rows and everything like that. And so what you have here is an insurance risk quality assessment rating tool. So you have a lot of buildings. So every row represents a particular building, a particular apartment. And it has an address, it has a property value and a few other things. And then you also have different ratings for that building, for each building. So risk quality rating for location, sprinkler protection, water supply, surveillance, and so on. Very typical pattern, very typical table, right? Nothing fancy here. Now, what happens is, most of the time, you don't necessarily need to show the entire table all the time. Instead, many people will be exploring a table like this or like that. These are representative for specific different tasks. Why? Whenever you're looking at a table like this, what are you doing, actually? Yes, you're comparing values across different buildings, right? So you're comparing actually specific attribute across different buildings. What do you do here? Yeah, you'll explore information on a specific building. Usually you might need a couple of attributes to explore at the same time, or you might need a couple of buildings to explore at the same time. But at no point in time, necessarily, do you need to see all attributes and all buildings at the same time. So that means, for example, when we're transforming it to mobile, one pattern that I saw working really well is this one, right? Allow people to select the category or attribute that they want to choose first, and then you show everything else as cards. So every building, kind of every row becomes a card, but in that card, you only see that attribute. It can also be a combi box, like a multi-combo box. People can select multiple attributes, right? That gives you access to all the attributes across all the buildings. But if you need to dive in on a specific one, you have an option as well by going into a card. So you're kind of navigating this entire table without having a table at all, right? And that works just magically. In fact, I would argue that maybe you don't even need a table at all. I mean, sometimes you might need to have a table view and the list view, right? But it might be perfectly fine if you actually keep it like this, right? There are plenty more examples in the course, of course, but this is something that I would highly encourage you to kind of look into, right? Table for desktop and list view for mobile. I mean, yeah, why not? Unless you actually even avoid a table altogether. I mean, it might not be really needed. Wolfgang is wondering, what do you think about, I mean, tables are important when you want to compare. We shouldn't dismiss tables just because they don't fit somewhere, right? They're very, very important when you want to compare, but they're not necessarily ideal for mobile. They're usually going to be trouble. Wolfgang is wondering, what do you think about tabs on log pages to break it down? Is there a pattern you'd recommend instead of tabs. Tabs have one issue, and that's discoverability, because they're hiding content. So whenever you have, let's say, 5 tabs, people often will scroll past without even noticing them. So they will never find out that there are content that exists in those tabs. So one thing you definitely need to do on the long page is to have a floating tabs button area. We can actually tab through all the different sections, and they would still be visible, either at the bottom or on the top, right? So that's definitely important when you have a long page. Tabs to break it down, I think. So from my experience, you will always have some discoverability issues whenever you actually hide content behind tabs. Because if you do that, if you do hide content behind tabs, you better have a really good research done to make sure that every label is perfectly clear and understood. Otherwise, this content will never be explored or discovered. Oh, thank you, Keith. It's wonderful to have you adding a link here to some of the work around responsive data visualization. Oh, I'm definitely going to look into that. That's cool. Thank you so much. Stefan is wondering, what is your opinion about putting the menu of mobile optimized websites to the bottom of the screen like it is in the apps? Fine. I mean, one of my favorite websites is the Austrian Postal Service website, and they do just that, right? So whenever we go in here, right, and we go into mobile view, they do just that. Nothing bad here. That's fine. That works. I mean, in general, I'm all for prioritizing things that matters. Whenever you kind of display those things separately, exposed like that, that means that you want to bring attention to them because they're important. If these are the things that are important on the site, if these are some of the top tasks that people do on the site, that's fine with me. I have no problems here at all. Of course, if you add more than 4 items, where it becomes a bit problematic, right? But if you have just 4, that's fine, as long as these are the important things on the site. I'm perfectly fine with it. I never saw any trouble with that. Gerald is wondering, are light boxes, which are kind of carousel pop-up mix-up, a suitable solution for galleries of products? On the first image of gallery is shown on page itself, others are only visible in Lightbox. Or how to do it better. Let's see, let's take a look at an example here. All right, so we have those things and we have this thing here. I mean, in general, I would say that whenever it comes to any kind of property management, vacation, or anything like that, there is no harm in doing this kind of model to bring focus into it, because people will be zooming in and looking into all the fine details. I think in many ways, this also resembles any experience you get from, let's say, booking.com, right? Whenever you go in, one of the images, right here, right? Kind of get a slightly different view, but then still eventually you get here, right? So, I mean, I'm all in for giving people a bit of clue about what's coming up next, right? This is, again, better than just having dots, right? I think that's fine. I don't see any particular issue here. It could be kind of combined by showing the thumbnails as well, maybe, right? But that's probably the only thing that you could do, if that helps. René is wondering, but then tabs are not much different from accordions. Both hide content. Yes, that is true. That is true. I mean, this is kind of the same problem. It just typically, I think my camera just decided it doesn't want to play along. So I'm going to switch to another camera. My camera is exhausted, it tells me. Ooh, dear camera. I'm going to let you be for a moment. Yes, but then in the case of accordions, it's different because usually they are kind of, they take a lot of vertical space. They probably will be more noticeable. With tabs, again, it's more of a horizontal assignment, so it's alignment, so it's kind of a little bit different, I guess. As a follow-up to Stefan's question, how do you feel about floating menu, like material design to replace hamburger menu? I would say I don't necessarily mind it. Really, I would say there is no particular pattern that I just say never, ever, except for the sliding in menu, to be honest. Right, that's the only thing. But everything else seems to be just fine as long as people understand how this works and they use it. One issue that appears with hamburger menus, I mean, by the way, it's even on Smashing we're doing this, right? Where we have, whenever we add the book to your shopping cart, let's say, like this, like we also have this little thing showing up at the bottom right, which is kind of also almost like a floating menu. So then as you keep going, kind of still there. That's fine. And it's kind of the same on mobile as well. I don't have a particular problem with that. What I do have a problem with, whenever error messages appear like that. So sometimes you get error messages that are floating messages, which are literally toast messages. That's a disaster. That's probably the worst thing you can ever do, because people need to consult the error message when they're fixing an error. So whenever you have, almost automatically disappearing error message, that's like no, that's just really, really bad, I would say. And Jason is saying one benefit of an accordion or a tab is that you can have multiple accordions open at the same time, so you can see all of the content. You can do the same on websites with tabs as well, Jason. And I'm going to show you an example of that. And that would be the city of Antwerp. Sometimes I feel like I know websites better than I do people. That's very sad. City of Antwerp website, right here. I think was it this one? No, I think it was Visit Antwerp. Yeah, here we go, this one. This is another example, which I didn't get into. It doesn't exist anymore. That makes me very sad, I have to say. Here we go. Oh, it has changed. No. That's very disappointing. That's very disappointing, but I have a recording because I don't trust the internet. I don't trust the internet. So let's see. Here we go. I think it's this one. Yes. You can change as much as you like. I still have the recording. So this is what it looked like. And it was interesting because when I discovered it, again, it changed my life for the good as well. So here we have just a regular menu, right? And you can think about tabs operating in the same way. So you tap on one of the tabs, right? And it stays sticky. It doesn't get removed. It doesn't disappear. It just stays. You can scroll if you like. You can open another menu at the same time. So you can actually see multiple menus at the same time. Is it a good idea? I have no idea, to be honest. But you can potentially pull off something like this with tabs as well. It just tabs usually have an active area, right? So it's probably going to be difficult to have two separate active areas, but who knows? Maybe it will work. What do you think to show a backlink on the same level than the breadcrumb? Sure, that's fine. I mean, I don't see any problems there as well. Fine. I mean, whenever you have I don't know if it's needed really, because you actually have the breadcrumbs. Sometimes breadcrumbs are a little bit overrated, because what happens is, so breadcrumbs represent the content structure, the information architecture on the site, but this is not necessarily the path that people have taken to get to a page, right? So what happens is sometimes people get confused because the path that they have taken does not match the path that is displayed on the page. So that's kind of an issue. And sometimes when people try to get back, right, they just go to the home page and then navigate from there. That's actually more common than we think. So I like breadcrumbs. I still believe that they're very, very important and very useful, right? But if you have breadcrumbs, I'm not sure if back button is really that critical anymore, but it probably won't hurt, right? But I'm not sure if it's really necessary, put it this way. Sabina, I was just amazed at how you remember all the websites. Well, I have a good memory for websites, I guess. Last question from Wolfgang. Have you had any experience with AR and VR related UI? As UX UI designer, should we already take a look into all that to stay up to date? I think, to be honest, yes. I have to admit that I really don't think that that metaverse is going to take off and become the thing. Please throw stones at me if you want to, but there is no harm in learning about AR or VR. There was a great article. There is a great section for you right here on introducing AR and VR, but it kind of looks from the perspective of typography. But there are some interesting patterns and some things to explore for text and for websites as well. There was, I think, also a case study I saw recently about VR, AR, UX, but I probably won't be able to find it. Maybe it was even this one. I'm not sure. Okay, as we always do with Medium, we go into incognito mode, and then we try to find this there. I'm not sure. There was an article, a case study or something on AR, VR for designers. I would say, I would personally just want to learn a little bit, just a little bit about AR, VR and what it means for me. but I haven't really experimented with it, to be honest. I totally agree with John and with Derek. Right. All right. Yuri is saying breadcrumbs are totally underrated as a great element of a good navigation. I agree, which is why I wrote an article about them. So if you want to learn a bit more about breadcrumbs, I wrote an article about designing a perfect breadcrumbs navigation where you find a lot of stuff in there. Also, if you're interested, you will also be able to find a lot of things around that topic. I actually should add a link. I think it's just missing design patterns. That's actually quite strange. But there's a lot of stuff over here. So I'm going to type it the link. I'm working on a book at this point about all those design patterns. So you will find a lot of stuff about mobile navigation and privacy and inline validation and UX checklist. Here we go. Somebody asked for UX checklist. Here we go. That's right there. Zoom question: how do we save this chat for reference? I can also add a link to it in Google Doc, so you can also export it and can make it accessible as well. So that's no problem. Why did you go into incognito mode on Medium? Just because I don't have an account on Medium. So whenever you go into incognito mode, you can read anything you like on Medium. Sorry, that's more like a life hack for me. Probably not a good one. All right, any further questions, friends? All right, a few more from Rude. What are your thoughts on best practices skeleton loaders? I would say I kind of like this example that Stripe has for, probably don't have it here, right? Where, I mean, they're all more or less the same, I would say, almost. It's just the one thing I would definitely try to avoid is a loading spinner, just loading and loading and loading and loading. It's really frustrating. Maybe one example on that as well, while you're here, is something that is actually quite common, and that's a real issue. I mean, this is a big issue in enterprise, and this is a big issue in e-commerce. And this has to deal with filters. So whenever we look at filters, this is the common experience that we usually get. I'm not trying to make fun of any websites, right? But this is actually quite common. So what happens is, you choose one filter, everything freezes, then you're being scrolled up to the start of the page, and then you have to scroll down to continue using your filters. That's frustrating, that's annoying, that's also totally unnecessary. And in the case of seriously, don't even highlight the selection of the filters that I've chosen, and also they automatically close accordions that I have chosen as well. Just really, really, really sad. And then you also get some similar experience on Dell. Here I have to tell you a really bad joke because it fits, I guess. How would you call a singing computer? A Dell. Okay, maybe that's not funny. Sorry about that, but let's just go with it. So when we look at Dell, so we have the same problem here as well. So when you start tapping and you have the first selection, second, third, every single tap means that the system understands my needs. And then there is a refresh. And as it appears, only one item in the filters, only one single filter is applied. That's not fair. That's not what I signed up for, right? That's not cool. And you find it all over the place. So there are two really good patterns of how you can fix it for good. Here is one of them. The first one is to decouple the filters from search results. So here on the Stockholm University website, you can tap as much as you like and click as much as you like on any kind of filters. Nothing is slowing you down. There is no skeleton screen, no nothing. You just do your thing, right? And whenever there is no apply button, by the way, either. And whenever you're done, you're waiting a little bit, and then the search displays your results. And these are not links to pages. These are actual results. It's more like an information system. And on top of that, additionally to that, you also get a search or filtering for items that you have in the search results. That's brilliant. That's everything I ever wanted in one single UI. But sometimes you don't have a sidebar on the left. Sometimes you have it on the top. And this is where this is my reference example. I like Galaxus a lot. Galaxus is great. So what we have in Galaxus is a very calm, very respectful, and very simple filtering experience. So here are the filters, 6 of them. You click on the selection of what filter you want to use. You never slow down. there is a loading indicator on the button, right? But that's the only place where it happens. So again, if I actually start exploring it, right, and let's say click on one of the items, like here, the brands, I'm selecting the brands, I choose the first one, it shows me how many items I should be expecting there. All right, it registers my input. I can continue with the next filter already. And I'm showing, I have a button saying, okay, now do you want to see 13 products or 28 products now? Please note that nothing in the background has changed. The background is the same. The products items haven't updated. Why should they? I haven't finished my filtering selection yet, right? So you keep going and keep going and keep going. And eventually, whenever you click on that button, you actually get that update coming in. Calm, respectful, simple, like everything I ever wanted. Right? There is no need to reinvent the wheel altogether. How would it work on mobile, though, you might ask? Not like this. So again, we'll look at Walgreens, the same problem all over again, like we saw in Dell, right? There is an assumption, I guess, baked in that people will be actually using only one filter at a time, which is not true at all. It's very common that people use 5, 6, 7 filters. So you choose one filter, and then the filter gets applied, and then the window gets closed, and then you have to reopen the window to go and continue filtering. That's not ideal at all, right? Here's another example of Nordstrom, which is not ideal either. I don't get this pattern at all. I just don't get it. Why do we do this? So we have kind of a portion of the screen dedicated to filters, but then some part of it is dedicated to blurring. And then as you navigate the filters here, even although I'm not finished with the input yet, and I haven't selected all the filters, and I haven't clicked on done or anything like that, it refreshes in the back, basically waste. Why would we do that? That doesn't make sense. I mean, surely, yeah, if you want to click out and kind of get out of this menu, you can do that. But maybe it would be better to have a close button or cancel button or anything like that instead. Shouldn't we just make use of all of the available space instead? Here's the same story if again talking about skeletons here in Crutchfield, right? Sure, it's fine if you actually have this little animation showing up, as you will see in a moment, like hey, but I don't care about dancing speakers, really. Just let me go and filter as much as I want to. That would be actually much more useful for me, right? And so how can we make it better than on mobile? Well, again, the same story. We either go with accordions, with a kind of filter, floating filter on the top. So, I mean, in this case, there is a sliding in from right to left, which I'm not a big fan of, as you know, right? But it works, right? That's fine. At least we're taking the entire space to display those filters, right? And then as you keep returning back, it kind of highlights you what you have selected, which is actually pretty neat as well. I think I have this distribution histogram slider as well. It's all nice, right here. Or the example that we saw previously, right here, right, where you have this bottom sheet overlay for sorting, but then for filtering, well, we kind of just splitting the screen. That's such a better use of space compared to the example we saw where just 40% of the screen is blurry. Why would we do that? That doesn't make sense, right? And it's all very calm. There is no freeze for you. Nothing stops you. Just keep going, right? So that just works. So I would say if I had a choice, I would always go with something like this or something like Galaxus or something like this University of Stockholm website. But in general, I mean, I would probably try to show something meaningful all the time. And when it comes to filters, I would prefer to allow people to just tap as many filters as they can instead of slowing them down with a skeleton or loader. Oh, thank you so much for your kind words, Olympia. My pleasure. Oh, thank you, Stephanie, as well. All right. Oh, so excited, Stacy. Thank you so much. All right. Uli is wondering, do you have experience in terms of the role of UX in learning applications, web-based trainings? We develop web-based trainings and would love to probably have a chat with you about this. Role of UX in learning applications. No, frankly, I don't have experience about that specifically. What I was working on was so I had an experience with a company, just to give you a bit of context, a lot of insurance companies, a lot of e-commerce, where we could test a lot of stuff. Then building or designing a very complex form design system where basically we were transforming print PDFs right, into digital journeys, beautiful digital journeys. So it was all about creating universally accessible form design system and actually deciding on the process, kind of specification process in that space. That was actually quite complicated, but I never had specific experience on trainings. But please feel free to send me an email, Udi, and I'm happy to chat. You can find my email over here in the Google Doc. Again, just for everyone, I'm going to paste in the link to the Google Doc right here. Right. Okay. Let's see if I have something else here. Okay. All right. Oh, no worries, Colette. Thank you so much for coming. Where can we find the recording to check all these ideas again? I think you will find them over here in that Google Doc that I just pasted right here. This will be replaced with a video recording. So don't worry if you missed it or you came late, you want to rewatch it. No problem there. Oh, Mariana has brought up a very interesting question. On mobile for filters, do we really need apply button or is it no need for this action? I think on mobile, it's very much reasonable to have an apply button. On desktop, maybe not necessarily, especially if you have filters living on the sidebar on the left. Oh, sorry, filters living on the top, because they're probably going to be applied immediately. But even then, I would say, maybe if you have filters on the left, then there is a bit more, from my experience, there is a bit more expectation that it will be applied immediately, unless you have an apply button somewhere. Personally, I just don't see the need, sometimes at least, to apply immediately, because people really want to maybe apply more than one filter. So sometimes if you just go ahead and apply immediately right away, it's actually more disturbing than helpful because something flashes or something changes. So I don't know if we need to apply right away. Maybe apply button is fine. At least, I mean, again, all those things are just ideas. So eventually they need to be tested in the face of actual real usability testing. But yeah, from my experience, that just seems to be working fine. Yep, Renee, you're right. So there could be some issues with backend implementation as well. If you have a backend issues, by the way, because you know, I spent like a lot of time in front-end performance optimization work as well. There's a really great article of how BBC did use the server timing API. That goes a little bit into development now. This one, and we also have an article about that on Smashing, by the way. So that helps a lot to find out what issues exactly exist on the backend. Renee, I'm very happy that you're working on filters highly inspired by galaxies. They are nice and friendly. All right. Okay. So Marlon is wondering, what are your thoughts on responsive tables turning into accordions for mobile views? Yeah, that's a very common pattern, but sometimes you still need a table. So if you need a table, like a table, then I would go into the Dropbox pricing plans to see this as an example. So let's see this one, I think. I hope it didn't change yet on mobile, because this was an interesting pattern that they were using. Another one is N26 pricing plans. Right here. So the way they work on this and they do this is pretty much this. So you basically have your options, but then eventually whenever you need a table, you don't necessarily need the entire table. They let you show or see only 2 columns at a time. So you choose the first column, choose the second column. Depending on the content that you have, you might show 3 columns at a time, and you allow people to customize it. And whenever you have tables like this, it's usually a good idea to allow people to select columns that they want to see, and also be able to customize, kind of move things around, for example, right? So that could be helpful. But the other thing, which was actually quite surprising, and I never tested it, but it's maybe something for you to see and know. So whenever you get to N26, there is this thing that they have where it's kind of tabs. You swipe left and you swipe right, in order to get to one plan or the other. But one other thing that they also do is they have this kind of selection right here, so you can kind of jump between them. And you also have, all right, it has changed a little bit as well. It has changed now. So you can swipe and kind of move between them like this. So kind of turning again every single row into an accordion, right? So I don't see a lot of problems with this. I also, by the way, wrote an article about this, pricing plans smashing. So you'll find a lot of examples on complex tables and how they can be done well or better in here. All right, so let me just check. So quick question from Michael. Can you talk a little more about the Smart Interface Design course and the live UX training? Yeah, so that's something that I've been working on over the last two and a half years, kind of collecting like all the video examples is just the tip of the iceberg, of course. I then went ahead and recorded now 8 hours of content broken down into 30 segments. It's more like 30 segments now. And I can show you the preview of what it looks like just a moment. So once you're inside, let me just see if I can get in quickly. Sorry about that, friends. Oh, I need to take a look at this one, right? Thinkific, right? And maybe let me see if I can do this. So I can kind of give you a preview of what it looks like inside. Some people in this call are already in it, so thank you so much for your kind support. But from my end, what I can show you is what it looks like from inside. Let me just show this very, very quickly. So this is the video library of all the sections that we have. So you will see pricing pages and a lot of authentication stuff, social sign-ins and access recovery, usability security, pricing pages, and all of this recorded, design KPIs, data tables, and so on. And specifically, whenever you look at the course, right now, let's say we'll look at this here, right? And we'll look maybe at this. This is what it's going to look like, right? Where you have all this video.
And also it's about interface challenges.
Which are recorded kind of, I mean, professionally recorded, I guess, I think. But there are also different ones. Some of them are newer, some of them are older. So this is the one on mega drop-downs, for navigation. Right? Usually this is going to be like this, where we're going through a lot of stuff. Here we have 12 segments over here. We have 15 or 16 maybe now over here. And then if you look, for example, at the data tables, it's a 15 minutes video. In fact, tables. It's so weird to see myself in here. You will find a lot of examples here in place as well. So that's pretty neat. Now, as an example of how it's built, every year I'm adding 5 new videos to it because I kind of do this research for my project, for my work anyway. So I like to keep it it's almost like my point of reference. So it's almost like my personal bookmark. And I add those things for free. So you buy once and you get it all, forever. But of course, as time passes by, it gets more expensive because there is more content in there, right? And additionally to that, twice a year, we do the certification course. It's not necessarily, it's not the same like the video course at all. It's different. So this is literally a live UX training where we take 4 actual projects in a 4-week sprint, and we work on trying to solve them. And these are pretty much like that example that you saw here, kind of trying to understand everything. How can we make it work well on mobile and on desktop, right? And it's actually based on the projects and the work that I've been doing in different companies, different organizations. And we do them twice a year, right? And one really important thing to me is that whenever we're doing this, you get a one-to-one feedback with me. So that means you have to, if you want to get a certificate, right? You can just attend and watch the sessions. If that's up for you, that's fine. But you can also work on 4 projects. And if you complete all of them, you get a certificate. The certificate looks like this, nothing fancy here, right? There are a few people who succeeded in it so far, right? That looks pretty much like this, right? But the best part for me really is that you're actually getting one-to-one feedback. So what I'm doing, whenever you prepare or finish your project, you send it to me, and then I record a video with some like 10-15 minutes feedback of what I expect from you to improve things. So it's not like hey, thank you for attending, and that's done, like, let's say in this particular session, right? But it's much more collaborative, and I set quite high expectations, but I think I'm not trying to be difficult. I just try to make sure that somebody who is attending really takes something from that training, right? So because these are complex, quite sophisticated projects, which I spent months working on, I do not expect, of course, everybody to just come up with a unique solution within a week. but by going through them, you're actually gaining some experience of how it's like and what we need to keep in mind and what are some of the constraints. And then we also explore this design KPIs methodology and how to apply that as well. So that's fun, right? And I just think that this is for me, this is a very valuable experience because I learn how other people think in their organizations, and you're working with kind of teams and groups as well, right? And in fact, I think I have a board for this here. That's usually what it looks like. We have a shared board, and then we have different teams across that board, and you conduct and complete your work individually, but you also have access to people in your group to have a chat, to kind of throw ideas back and forth. So it's very collaborative. It's a lot of fun too, right? So that's great to that. Hope it was helpful. Right. Claire is wondering, what are your thoughts on graying out options based on previous filter selections, like selecting genes and ping gray out since no ping genes are available? Yes. So in general, I found that disabled state can be quite problematic. So maybe not in that particular case. Here's an article that I wrote about disabled buttons, by the way. I would say when it comes to disabled state, ideally we need to communicate to users why it's disabled. So maybe I would try to say, maybe there is a way to help people kind of nudge them away from zero results, right? Well, the option to, let's say, hide it altogether or show a disabled button or disabled state, I would probably then pick a disabled state, if I'm being honest. But maybe the other thing we could say is, well, it has zero results. Kind of show zero, right? Once somebody selects it. Hard, right? It's kind of difficult because even if it's disabled, we need to still use area to communicate with area disabled, that this is disabled and how to fix that. So that's a bit of an issue. Oh, thank you so much, Michael. All right, let's see if we have anything else in here. Right, for tables, should you tell the user to use the phone, tablet, and landscape horizontal mode? I would say no, Carlos. Usually that's considered to be not necessarily a bad practice, but it's just not ideal because what we want is the content to be accessible to people in any form that they prefer. There are exceptions. For example, if you're building a game, that's fine. That's probably going to be fine. If it's an image gallery, many people will do that anyway, so maybe that's fine. But overall, as a default, I would say rather no than yes. Annie is wondering, real estate website need to have lots of filters as well. Could you share one of your favorites? Yes. Let's see if I can find it. So that's one coming from Russia, of all places. It's a really complex site. Let's see if I can find it. Probably not, but maybe if you send me an email, I will be able to find it. It's called something Aston or anything. They have a lot of filters, but they actually designed it really well. So if you drop me a message, I'll be happy to look up any. Oh, thank you, Derek. It's very kind of you. You're being the kindest person alive. Probably the most intense course I've ever participated in. Oh, wow. I don't know if it's a good thing or not the good thing. All right. Leonard say can recommend Polypane. Polypane is great. It's very nice. So I think that the developer, I always forget his name, the developer of Polypane is a really good guy. He's doing a lot of work all alone on it. Great tool. Really, really great tool. Can you recommend training for UX accessibility? Yes, 2. Actually 3. First of all, if you're interested in accessibility, from a technical perspective, Sarah Suedan is working on her inclusive design course, accessibility course called Practical Accessibility. This is going to be amazing, but it's mostly on the technical side of things. Then we also have just a second, SVG accessible patterns meshing. Was Carrie Fisher. So she does a lot of stuff. So you can look Carrie up. She does really, really wonderful things. And here, there's also Marcy Sutton. She also does Marcy Sutton does also great accessibility courses on everything from testing to many other things as well, I think. So if you're interested, you can actually maybe find something in here as well. Marcy is really great. From the accessibility UX perspective, specifically, well, there is a lot of stuff. Sorry for plugging Stephanie all the time, but Stephanie has a really good stuff around accessibility and UX. And I think I even found an article recently, accessibility UX on documenting accessibility, I think. Yes, here we go. That's one, right? Which is really interesting. I mean, this really got me thinking, and there are also plenty of resources in here as well. And another one that's actually pretty cool as well, I think it's free UX. What was that? UX tools, UX tools, I think. Yeah, yes, this one, where there is a lot of stuff around those, not challenges. Was it resources, tools, articles? I think there was something in here around that. Maybe I'm mixing it up with something like Maze guides. Maze guides are also some really, really good guides around UX, by the way. Oh, greetings to you as well, Michael. Thank you so much for coming. Greetings to Ecuador. So here you'll find usability testing, user research, not accessibility, right? Oh, here we go. I think this is the one I was looking at. So maybe this will help. And yes, Stephanie also is running, going to run a workshop on design accessibility as well, right? So maybe that one. There are. I'm going to look up. Maybe I can find something, but that's the one that I've actually meant. Sure, Greg. Thank you. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for coming. It was supposed to be 1 hour, but I'm happy that it's actually 2.5. So this is pretty much close to what we have regularly with workshops. Just sometimes they go to 3 hours, as Derek, of course, knows. But if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm always here to help. Let's also connect on LinkedIn. Let's be friends on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect and also posting a lot of stuff in there every now and again. So if you have any question, you will find all the stuff here in the Google Doc. And also please feel free to reach out. If you want to, the video course, the music playlist is here. The slides are here, and the video recording will be here once we finish over here. Right. So thank you so much for coming, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the day, a peaceful, good day, and hope to see you soon.